ready? I'll entertain a motion.
That's fine, that's good.
Motion to open, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? So moved. The first item on our agenda this evening is a continued public hearing. Typical of the planning board, we will first read the notice of public hearing into the record. And after that, the applicant will be invited to the table. And after that, town council will...
thing on, like the actual mic.
Yeah, there you go, Joe. Well, it'll turn green in a minute. Now you're hot.
Okay. A little technical difficulty. Our first item on our agenda this evening is a continued public hearing. In a minute, I'll read the notice, just so that everyone listening and watching can follow along. Procedurally, we'll hear from the applicant first, then we'll hear from town council, then the board will ask any questions of either town council or the applicant that they have, and then any members of the public that are here may speak at that point in time. So with any further ado, I'm going to first, for the record, read the notice. A public hearing will be held in the Town Hall, Utanus Room, 3rd floor, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Mass., on the petition of the residents at Stoughton Junction Condominium Trust, 10 Porter Street, for a special permit under the Stoughton Mixed Use Overlay District, also known as the SMOOD. Bylaw Section 200-94, uses allowed by special permit, paragraph A, 2A. Dwelling units located above retail, restaurant, professional office, and service, personal service, or other non-residential use or uses, at ground level and below. The applicant seeks planning board approval for the continued commercial use of units 10A, 10B, 10C, and 10D, located at 10 Porter Street, further identified on Assessor's Plan number 54, Lot 173. The special permit application and plans can be viewed at the office of the Stoughton Planning Board, Engineering Department, Town Hall, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Mass., during normal business hours. The petitioner and/or his representative or any other persons desiring to be heard on this matter should appear at the time and place designated. Town of Stoughton Planning Board, Joseph O. Scardino, Chairperson. Published in the Stoughton Journal, issues of March 20th and March 27, 2015. Would the applicant please approach the table? As soon as you get yourself settled, would you please state your name and address for the record?
Good evening. My name is James Curtin. I'm one of the trustees for Stoughton, the residents at Stoughton Junction Condo Trust. My address, are you asking for my home address or the address of the Stoughton Junction?
Yes, your own address.
My home address is in 91 Canton Street in Westwood, Massachusetts. But my commercial office is at 10 Porter Street here in Stoughton, Massachusetts.
And what relief are you here for this evening, sir?
Excuse me, sir?
What relief are you here for this evening?
Well, I wasn't aware. I purchased 3 of the 4 commercial units at 10 Porter Street back in August of 2008. And when Mr. McGrath became the building inspector, he actually had to come and do an inspection. And at that point, it became apparent to us that supposedly the commercial units don't exist. Or I guess that's right, Tom?
Well, the permit that was issued was for 8 residential units, with the anticipation that 2 of the residential units could be converted to, 2 of the ground floor units could be converted to commercial use. But when I was there to do the periodic inspection, which probably was my first year here in 2011, when I went back to look at the file to see how many, I had inspected 10 units, but when I went back and looked at the file, I saw the permit was only issued for 8. So that's when the situation became apparent.
So,
At that point, I'm going to ask you to hold your comments, and I'm going to ask town council, who I believe also was at the ZBA for this decision.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think I have the history of this that may be useful. The property is in the CBD zoning district, and in 2006, the property received a special permit, which was necessary in order to allow multifamily use. And that January 2006 special permit allowed the multifamily use for 8 units. And there was a discussion, and it's reflected in the special permit itself, there was a discussion that the applicant, the then owners of the property, wanted to have at least 2 commercial units. However, a mixed use was not allowed at that time in the CBD district. And so the 2006 special permit expressly stated that there would be only 8 units, and there could be 8 residential units with not more than 2 bedrooms each, but that certainly 2 of the 8 units, the 2 on the ground floor, could be kept vacant because it was anticipated that the planning board was bringing forward the SMAC bylaw that same year, which they did bring forward, and it was adopted by town meeting, which allowed for a mixed use situation. So the 2006 special permit very specifically stated either leave the 2 bottom units on the ground floor empty and then get the SMAC special permit relief that's necessary in order to make them into commercial units, or convert them to affordable units immediately. That's what the special permit said. I understand, and I'm basing this on the facts that have been related to me by various town officials, that what happened is that when the building was redone, the 2 units in the bottom floor, in the basement, were constructed without building permits and without occupancy permits. And then the units on the ground floor went ahead as commercial units and were occupied for commercial uses, but without getting the SMAC special permit relief that was necessary. So I understand that the applicant is here this evening to convert 4 of the 10 units over at the property into commercial units. And certainly the planning board has the authority under the SMAC bylaw to allow that relief, but only if the project satisfies all of the requirements of the SMAC. And the difficulty, as we know, is that the SMAC at section 5.08A says that if you have more than 5 residential units within a project, then 20% of the units need to be affordable. So we're here tonight to discuss the fact that there are violations out there, that 8 units were specifically allowed under the special permit, but 10 were built, and no commercial units were allowed, but 4 are in place. And I have gone through, as the planning board knows, a series of options that perhaps could avoid zoning enforcement. And of course, the building commissioner has very carefully waited to undertake zoning enforcement until the zoning relief process runs its course. And so obviously, if it were possible to take 2 units and make them affordable now, then that would resolve the problem, or if they could happen in the near future. The thing that I would note, Mr. Chairman, just so that everybody is aware, in order to do affordable units under the LIP program and to get them permanently added to the SHI as is contemplated under the SMAC, there would be a requirement that there be a lottery through DHCD. So there are some serious requirements, procedures that need to happen in order to create the affordable units. And of course, one of the other options would be to take one of the existing 6 residential units and convert it to commercial, and then you wouldn't have more than 5 at that point, more than 5 residential, which would do away with the affordability requirement. And as I've stated, there are a series of conditions that you could consider. I assume they've been shared with the board. And certainly, if that doesn't happen, then the only thing that's left is zoning enforcement to remove the 2 units in the basement and to take the 2 on the ground floor, and they would need to, under the special permit, the 2006 special permit, they should be converted to affordable units. Or there could be a change to the zoning bylaw sought to allow perhaps some kind of monetary compensation to come to the town in lieu of the affordable units, or to remove the affordability requirement, but I understand that that was tried at the last town meeting and that that was not successful.
No, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I purchased 3 of the 4 units as a bona fide purchaser. I had a attorney serve in my capacity as, in my closing. I actually bought 2 of them under a 504 plan, which is a small business administration loan. Literally, I was hit by the back of on the side of the head when Mr. McGrath basically told me, oh, your units, they're not what they're supposed to be. That said, I have Mr. Sullivan, who actually built the buildings, who is sitting here, who actually marched through this exercise with the, I believe it was the Board of Appeals, who, and again, I'm not an expert in this situation. To my knowledge, it went to the Board of Appeals. They basically said it was okay for the commercial units, and then it was supposed to be remanded back to your board for approval or sign off or something. All 4 units went through, to my knowledge, inspection, but I can't confirm that. So with that said, I would like Mr. Sullivan to, he has the history, I don't know the history from August of 2008 to today, other than the fact that based on what legal counsel is telling me, that maybe I should pack my bags and get out of Stoughton, which, you know, I've been paying commercial real estate taxes since August of 2008. So, I mean, it's just amazing to me. But with that said, with your permission and the board's permission, I'd like Mr. Sullivan to fill in the gaps, if that would be all right.
Mr. Sullivan, you have the microphone. State your name and address, residential address for the...
Good evening. My name is Paul Sullivan. I live at 21 Smith Road, Milton, Massachusetts. I mean, I don't remember every detail of it, but I have a pretty good general sense of what happened. As was stated earlier, we had the units approved, the residential units approved, the appeals decision. The overlay was in progress but not approved for the Stoughton Center zone. And so we were told that since mixed use was not allowed at that time, that we would suggested we wait until the zoning got passed, and then we'd come before the planning board to seek the approval to use those units as commercial units. Unfortunately, when we were building the buildings, and it just forgot all about it, we slipped our minds that we were required to come back. We had all the units inspected during the process. They've all been assessed individually as commercial units, and taxes have been paid on them. And you know, the suggestion that one of the 6 residential units be turned into an affordable unit, those are all owned by private citizens. I don't see how you could do that. You know, it's a unique situation. They all meet handicap accessible. The staircases are there, the elevator, the plumbing, electrical, all meet code. They were all inspected. Unfortunately, we don't have, haven't been able to find the records of it, but I mean, it was if you go back through the minutes of many planning board hearings, post completion of the buildings, both buildings, there was much discussion about there was 4 commercial units, and there was 8 residential units at 10 Rose, and there was 6 at 10 Porter. So I don't think it's a big surprise. It was, it was, obviously it was overlooked unintentionally, and, but I don't understand how anybody could expect Mr. Curtin to turn some of his units into affordable units. I don't think that's, I think there's got to be a better solution than that.
You're from town council, you could address some of those.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I understand what Mr. Sullivan is saying is that there were specific conditions in the 2006 special permit, only build 8 units and only build 6 as residential in the event that you wanted 2 as commercial, and come back for the Schmood special permit in the event that it was available, and it just didn't happen. Since there is a zoning violation that has now come to the building department and zoning office attention, it needs to be addressed, and there are a number of ways to address it. One would be to create the affordable housing. I understand Mr. Sullivan is saying, and the first question really would have been just that, whether that would be possible, and he's indicating that the six units are individually owned, so it would seem difficult, probably impossible, to convert 2 of them to affordable, or even 1 to a commercial use, which then would relieve the problem. Because what the Schmood says, and this couldn't have necessarily been anticipated by the ZBA in January of 2006, what the Schmood says is that in order to get the mixed-use special permit, if there's a residential component with more than 5 units under section 5.08A, there's a requirement that 20% affordability be provided. So again, one option is to provide the affordability. You're saying it's just not possible, and it sounds like you're also saying it's not possible, or likely not possible, to convert one of the 6 residential units into a commercial unit. That options, Mr. Chairman, in order to comply with the bylaw. Certainly this board has jurisdiction to give a mixed-use permit, but only in compliance with the criteria under the bylaw.
Mr. Chairman?
Sullivan?
Yes. I agree. It's a very difficult situation. Unfortunately, no one did anything intentionally to create this situation. It's unfortunate it happened. Obviously, Mr. Curtin has loans on his units, and he's not in a position to turn them into affordable. It's, as you said, when the Board of Appeals approved the development, they didn't know the final language of the overlay. So it was difficult to anticipate, but those units were built, I believe, prior to the final approval, and so they existed prior to that, but I'm not sure, what the simple solution there is. There probably isn't a simple solution, but doing affordables in that building now would be very difficult, extremely difficult, obviously. And maybe there's some other way to create some affordable units, or some other way to address the issues.
Mr. Curtin, you had indicated in the brief remarks at the beginning of this hearing that you were represented by counsel with respect to the purchase of those units.
I was, yes, I was. At the closing, I had hired legal counsel to do the closing, and again, it was a 504 small business loan for 2 of the 3 units I purchased.
But that was the lender's counsel, correct? It wasn't your own attorney?
Well, I had my own legal counsel, but yes.
So you're saying there were 2 attorneys involved? One for the bank and one?
There was 2. There was one for the Small Business Administration, there was one for the bank, and there was one my own. And I have talked to my title insurance about this, and they have stated to me, and again, I'm a CPA, not an attorney. They have indicated to me that they relied on a zoning opinion, I'm not sure which one of the attorneys wrote it, that said that it was, it seemed to be clear and it was okay, and, you know, if I could go back to August of 2008, I wish they had told me no at this point.
Well, you get another, I'm not, just listening to what you're saying, usually that would be the closing, would be the bank's attorney
Right.
that would issue the zoning opinion to the
Right.
bank saying that
Right.
there's no zoning violation on this property.
Right,
So there was the last clear chance to blow the whistle.
right.
And since he didn't, now we're also 6 years from that closing, am I right? Or almost more than 6 years.
That sounds
My understanding of
approximately
the
correct,
malpractice
yes.
statute in this state is 6 years.
Well, you know, obviously, we can't give legal advice with respect to that.
I'm just looking at
And there
alternatives.
may be a discovery, you know, aspect to it as well.
I've
The
already
discovery
put them
will-
on notice.
I'm
Trust me.
sorry?
I've already put the title insurance on notice on this.
And that may very well be the only practical solution, because we cannot, as a body, grant the special permit status with having one of the legs of the permit process not substantiated. I mean, I've got projects now that are waiting for approval based on satisfying conditions of the SMAC. It certainly wouldn't be fair to any of those to have. We don't have the authority to waive those provisions. We've researched that, and so they're not even waivable by the planning board at this stage.
So, Mr. Chairman, so what you're telling me is that the likelihood of the overlay for that project is not going to happen?
Well, I think we've had a recitation of the law, and the law seems to be that either the number of units go below 6 at 5, and therefore the affordability requirement doesn't attach to the project, or you change the number of commercial units to satisfy the,
Okay.
or third, you seek damages for whatever loss you have from some other private person.
And Mr. Chairman, there would be another alternative too, which would be to convert the commercial units to residential. That would require an amendment to the multifamily special permit, but that obviously is something that there would be jurisdiction to give.
So, let me ask this final question. I run my CPA firm out of the basement at 10 Porter Street. And Tom has put me on notice, basically, on a criminal level, basically, in the letter. So is my option that I need to move out at this point?
Well, we can't tell you what option to pursue. We're just merely present the options. That's your election to decide which course of action you intend to pursue.
And to clarify, Mr. Chairman, this board, you know, does not have the authority to do enforcement. That would rest with the building commissioner, who's the zoning enforcement official in the town.
How do I remedy this situation? I guess do I need to go to the Board of Appeals? Do I need to go to the Board of Appeals and come back down to you again? I mean, you're right, this is 6 years or 7 years. I mean, this is a long time that I've been in the town of Stoughton. And, wow, what do I do? Someone needs to be able to direct me.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I would just, through you, say that this board can't give you legal advice or development advice. It would be wise for you to consider obtaining counsel at this point to assist you in determining what your options are and how you should best proceed. What you're here for this evening is a SMAC special permit to allow 2 additional units and to convert essentially 4 commercial units so that they're lawful as a mixed use under the SMAC. The difficulty that this board is faced with, because I can feel the sympathy, is that Section 5.08A of the SMAC mixed use bylaw specifically says if you have more than 5 residential units, you need to have 20% affordability. And you don't have, because this is at the end of the project, everything's already been sold out, it's not possible.
You understand there's 2 buildings involved, though, right?
Actually, I thought there were 3 altogether.
There's actually 2 with the residents at Stoughton Junction.
19 was built.
That
by
one's
another-
all residential.
There were 2 there, and then there was one
The
over
one on
here that were
19 is
connected.
19 Roses, was done by a different builder. It was completed by a different builder.
Okay.
They sold the found, or went through
They went
some of
through
their legal
bankruptcy.
proceedings.
So do I ask for a continuance here, or, you know, again, I'm a layperson,
You can, that's an option, and we can continue the public hearing. We have no problem doing that to allow you additional time. That's without prejudice to you.
well, I'd appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and the board members as well, if you would afford me that time. I guess I have to go back and speak to, obviously, Mr. McGrath. I got to speak to legal counsel and all that lovely stuff. I'm sorry to take up your time this evening.
As far as the way this works is you have, we have to continue this to a period certain. So at this point, we would have to, and we meet the 2nd and the 4th. And it doesn't have to be the next meeting, and it probably can't be the next meeting. So, Ms. O'Toole, do you have any idea what our calendar looks like for the 2nd meeting in May?
Yes, we're meeting on May 14th,
May 14th?
which is the second Thursday in May. And that would be probably a 7 o'clock meeting.
What's the next meeting
May 14th,
after that?
we haven't gone that far into the schedule because of town meeting.
Well, I would say that the 2nd, it's a Thursday, so it shouldn't, we should have not
Okay, with
interfere.
the 14th and perhaps the May 28th.
One of the
Usually
two?
meet on the 2nd and the...
7 o'clock?
Yes,
You want to be on the safe side and go with the 28th?
28th.
28th would probably be helpful to me, if that would be
Okay.
all right with the board.
Okay.
28.
Do we have a motion from the
Motion.
board?
Motion.
Mr. Chairman, before you do that, perhaps you would want to check with the town planner to see if an extension of time is needed. Are we in range?
Yeah, we will need, Mr. Curtin, an extension of time on the special permit itself.
Okay?
Yeah, we do, because we're right at the,
So we
right
need
at the
a
end.
written request.
So I need to, as the trustee of the residents,
Yes,
submit you
Stamp.
another request that
yes,
the meeting of the 28th,
yes, and we also need an extension of time on the application itself.
okay? All right?
Okay,
I
so
will
that-
talk to
Continue
legal
until we get a
counsel
letter from them.
tomorrow, and I'm sure that will be okay
The
with
28th.
him.
Mhm.
Is that okay with everyone?
As long as we receive the letter extension, or do you know the actual date of,
I don't, I would have to get downstairs and look that up.
The best thing to do, Mr. Chairman, would be to get an extension this evening, a written one, just saying that the deadline for you to act, to render a decision is, to the extent that it's necessary, it's extended to probably sometime, perhaps July 1st, so that you have enough time to do what you need to do.
I could actually do that extension of time with you right now, if you want to hand write it out.
That would be
Yeah.
That'd
fine.
be great.
So we can just go in the Utanus room and do that?
And then,
So
and
the
then you
board
can vote to
can
accept
vote-
it, then continue the
So
hearing.
we're not going to continue it yet then?
No, you wait till you get the extension.
Yeah,
Oh.
I think that we could even do it to August 1st, just to be on the safe side, but I'll tell you exactly what we need. So we're going to have 2 extensions, one to continue the public hearing, and an extension of time on the special permit itself.
right?
The decision.
Yes, the decision.
So how
So
we- how we
while
gonna
you're
close
doing
this?
that with the applicant, we'll take another issue up and then come back to this issue.
All righty.
We just need a motion on the new issue, so. We'll be continuing this for about 5 minutes. And in the interim, we will take up out of order the discussion of the peer review on the Pleasant Street Housing District Overlay bylaw. And can I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. In the mail, this is, to give you the genesis behind this particular item on the agenda. The Board of Selectmen required, after a presentation done by the applicant for the zoning bylaw change meeting, required a peer review of their consultants' reports overseen by the planning board. And so what you had in your packets is both the original and the peer review, which is the consultant's review of the consultant's work in both areas of traffic on this project and economic impact on the town. And what I'd like to do, the action required this evening is for us to discuss these reports and then recommend them being released to the public. And later on this evening, we're going to have an public information session with the neighborhood group that's surrounding the project on Pleasant Street. So at this time, what I'd like to do is to discuss and share with you the conclusions of the report, starting first with the economic report. And if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes to read the couple of pages that summarize the findings of our paid consultant. And just for the public record, the developer was required to pay for this out of their own funds. There's no public money expended for the peer review of this project. This is a summary of findings by Robert A. Mercier, Managing Director of Ramcar LLC Consultants. Summary of findings. This is a report to the Stoughton Planning Board dated April 2015. He cites the project, that is the project at Pleasant Street, 128 senior housing units, will create a substantial positive cash flow for the community after deducting the obvious cost of services. See my revisions to the cost revenue projections within the fiscal profile narrative. The Connor report, which is the original report done for the applicant, presents very reasonable standard municipal cost assumptions for service provisions as well as realistic, pragmatic revenue projections. Based on the 2014-15 values and projections of approximately $160,000 to $165,000 of positive cash flow for the town as a result of the completion of this project. Obviously, the lack of school-aged children is a key provision of this specific project. In any municipal budget, the schools are a primary driver of increased cost of municipalities. A cautionary note that I mentioned I would comment on earlier in my report regarding school children can essentially be defined under the moniker unintended consequences. The noble goal of providing a community's seniors with an alternative housing arrangement to allow them to stay in their community without the burdens of home ownership essentially creates new home buying opportunities for younger people in starter homes who then raise their families and send children into the schools. This project does promote local preference and selection criteria, and therefore the majority of the population occupying the complex will likely be Stoughton current homeowners. The expected modest annual increase in town revenues, levy increase by 1.5% to 2.5%, over the successor years will likely negate any significant burden on the town regarding this reality within a single fiscal year. The town should recognize that any analysis of this project within a community is not totally complete until years and sometimes decades beyond the original approved date. The projected cost associated with service delivery was generally presented in a very conservative format, favorable to the town, by Connery Associates, and the methods and assumptions are consistent with best municipal practices for costing out similar-sized use development proposal impacts. The town should consider the additional demands going forward for other services, See my comments on page 2 of my report, such as council on aging, recreation, library, other, etc., in your evaluation of the project impact. Although difficult to quantify with a dollar amount, the consideration of future costs should account for the additional services required annually as indirect costs. I have not commented on the likely offset improvements that the planning board and the developer will negotiate through a review process. Although these costs and expectations vary, my experience with projects like this typically involve an agreed-to development agreement that would otherwise outline responsibilities of both parties and become a legal attachment to any final approval to the proposed development. And what he's saying in a nutshell is that in comparing the cost that the town would have to provide in terms of municipal services in comparison to the revenue that the project will generate in terms of real estate taxes, generates a positive cash flow when you take those two items into consideration of approximately $165,000. And one comment on his comment about the increase in cost due to the library, council on aging, recreation, etc. In reading the report, that assumes that most of the residents will be new to Stoughton, because if there's seniors living in Stoughton and they're moving out of their homes, downsizing into these apartments, they would already be using those services. So that it kind of overstates the negative on that particular situation. That's my view on the so I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say or discuss regarding.
I have no questions.
Okay, having none, I'll move to the traffic impact study. Pardon me?
All set with me.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Nice seeing you again.
Good to see you.
And this peer review report was done for the planning board by GPI in Wilmington, Massachusetts. And the original traffic report was done by McMahon and Associates. So when he refers to the report, he's referring to the one done by McMahon Associates for the applicant. And again, there's been some concern about traffic conditions, and I would think that the town would be interested in the results of a review of that particular project and aspect. And these are the conclusions of GPI. As described in this review letter, while the TIS associated with the proposed senior housing development at 600R Pleasant Street was performed in alignment with industry standards, there are still some outstanding concerns that GPI recommends to be addressed. Vehicle speeds. GPI agrees with the installation of speed feedback signage, however recommends that these signs be mounted in closer proximity to the proposed site. Crash history. GPI recommends the full 5-year crash data period be analyzed, utilizing not only Mass DOT crash data, but also supplemented by local town of Stoughton police records in order to create a collision diagram of the Pleasant Street at Central Street intersection. The collision diagram should be utilized to establish crash patterns and note existing safety deficiencies. Planned roadway improvements. GPI recommends that the proponent advance the town's short and midterm improvements that have been developed for the Pleasant Street Route 139 at Central Street intersection. Specific development by others. GPI requests an explanation as to why traffic projections associated with the relocation of the Cumberland Farms and the proposed Sonic restaurant and the reoccupation of Shaw's Supermarket by Price Right were not accounted for under the no-build conditions. Site distance. GPI agrees with the proposed installation of speed feedback signage with the provision that these signs be mounted in closer proximity to the proposed site in order to be effective for the speed issue as it relates to available site distance. Pedestrian accommodations. GPI recommends that sidewalks be included along the site leading to Pleasant Street, along with sidewalks to safely connect the front door to these sidewalks. The sidewalk along the driveway should be designated to be ADA compliant in width and in grading, and should connect to a crosswalk across the site at Pleasant Street. In addition, consideration should be made to providing dedicated walkways around the perimeter of the proposed building to enhance the site for residents and provide safe walkable amenities. Parking circulation. GPI requests the proponent provide a site plan with dedicated handicapped accessible spaces marked to meet the minimum dimensional and quantitative requirements. Provide an updated conceptual site plan with proposed signage, striping for indicated review. Turning radii around the proposed building and at the site access driveway should be confirmed to the satisfaction of the Town of Stoughton Fire Chief. We hope this letter aids you in your review of the proposed project. Should you have any questions or require additional information, please contact me directly, Erica Gibboni, P.E. So I find nothing serious in that report. I don't know if any of the other members of the board have anything to say about the, but as Ms. Jordan indicated, it's pretty consistent to the original traffic report. And having heard no other further comments, I'm going to ask for a vote of the board to release the report to the general public. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I guess Ms. O'Toole hasn't joined us yet, so we...
Where are butters on that project you just mentioned?
We're addressing that and further
Later
down.
on in this evening, after the 7 o'clock hearing, we have a public information session with a presentation. At that point in time, your aspect will be discussed. You'll be given an opportunity to ask the presenter questions. The only, the reports that we have are available in the town planner's office, second floor of the engineering department. These are peer reviews done at the town's request of the consultants that the project.
I'm just looking for the definition of a feedback sign on that speed sign we're talking about. Is that an electric sign that lights up and tells you that?
I am not an engineer, so I'm going to suggest that's a very good question, and I suggest that you save that for the presentation done by the applicant, which will probably come somewhere around, I would venture to guess, 8 o'clock.
Yeah?
Yeah. The next item, the next public hearing is at 7 o'clock, and I can't tell how long that will last. So,
Mr. Chair, have you finished that section of peer review?
okay, do you want to read into the record, Ms. O'Toole, what you...
Yes. I would like to read into the record dated 4/23/15. This is the special permit case number SCM 15-01 10 Porter Street. This is to the Town of Stoughton, the Planning Board, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Mass. 02072. Regarding the special permit. Dear board members, I request an extension of time to the Planning Board's decision and the completion of the public hearing to August 1st, 2015. James Curtin, trustee, residence at Stoughton Junction Condo Trust.
Motion to accept.
Motion to accept that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? So continued, Tom.
Okay. Thank you, and it has been continued to May 28th at 7 p.m.
Need to vote.
7 p.m., May 28th.
Motion to continue the public hearing till May 28th, 7 p.m.
Second to that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm not sure of the room until I check with the town clerk the schedule, see what's available. I'll let you know.
We have approximately 10 minutes until our next public hearing. I would suggest that we probably take a 10-minute break since this is going to be a long evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Going off cable? Could I entertain a motion to go back online?
Motion open.
Second, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Oppositions? Hearing none. We're back in session. For those of you that just tuned in, this is our second public hearing of the evening. First, the notice of official record will be read into the record. Then we will hear from the applicant. Then we'll hear from the town experts, the town planner and the town engineer. And then we'll have questions of the board, and then we'll have questions of the public. And now for the official recording of the notice. A public hearing will be held in the Town Hall, Utanus Room, 3rd floor, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Mass., on Thursday, April 23rd, 2015, at 7 p.m. on the petition of Global Montello Group Corp., Mobile, represented by Joshua Lee Smith, Esquire, for site plan approval under the site plan review bylaw of the town of Stoughton for the proposed project, which consists of 46,974 square feet of land to build a convenience store, fast order food, gasoline station located at 32 Washington Street, further identified on Assessor's Plan numbers 56, lots 127, and located in a general business GB zoning district. The site plan application and plans can be viewed at the office of the Stoughton Planning Board, Engineering Department, Town Hall, 10 Pearl Street, Stoughton, Mass., during normal business hours. The petitioner and/or his representative or any other persons desiring to be heard in the matter should appear at the time and place designated. Town of Stoughton Planning Board, Joseph O. Scardino, Chairperson. Published in the Stoughton Journal, issues of April 3rd and April 10th, 2015. Mr. Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joshua Lee Smith. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Bowditch and Dewey. Is this, do I have to? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good evening. My name is Joshua Lee Smith. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Bowditch and Dewey. I'm here this evening representing Global Montello Group Corp. In connection with its redevelopment of an existing gasoline station site located at 372 Washington Street. By way of a very brief background with respect to the property itself, the property is located within a general business zoning district and no overlay districts. The property is a corner lot located at Washington Street and Central Street. The property currently consists of, or contains, an existing gasoline station building which houses a convenience store use as well as an Express Dunkin' Donuts. The existing building is approximately 900 square feet. There's a canopy located on the site as well as 2 existing designated parking spaces. The proposed project is really a beautification project. It's a complete redevelopment of the site, not only redevelopment of the existing building, but of the entire site. The proposal is to raise and rebuild the existing building and replace that with a larger, more modern, definitely more aesthetically appealing building, which will be shown in more detail in a moment. The new structure will be approximately 4,500 square feet in gross floor area. The property will contain a new canopy as well as new signage. There will also be newly striped parking spaces, a total of 18 to accommodate the site. There will be overall repaving of the site and reconfiguration of the traffic circulation within the site. There will also be the construction of a drive-through to accommodate service for the existing Dunkin' Donuts that's on the site. By way of a very brief procedural background, we first submitted our application to the planning board back in the end of December 2014. Prior to that, we submitted our application to the ZBA, and our first meeting with the ZBA was in the beginning of February 2015. At that meeting, the meeting was continued to April, this past last week, actually, to April 16th. The purpose of the reason for the continuance was primarily for to address certain questions that were raised by certain members of the board with respect to the potential traffic impacts. So the board requested an expansion of the traffic impact study that was submitted by my client's traffic consultant, McMahon Associates. The request, which Aaron Fredette is here of McMahon Associates. Yes. Oh, sorry. Okay. So an expanded traffic study was prepared and performed. Additional data was collected per request of the ZBA, and the traffic impacts were fully vetted by not only the ZBA, but also the ZBA has a benefit of having an actual traffic consultant on its board who was present at both meetings, the town engineer, Mark Tisdale, as well as a meeting that was had by and among Mass DOT representatives and my client, as well as Mr. Tisdale. And in addition to that, the town hired its own traffic consultant who also vetted the traffic impact study and the project, and we're happy to report that last week at our continued ZBA hearing, the board voted to approve the project as presented. So at this time, and I'd like to introduce Luke DiStefano of Bowler Engineering, who will discuss in more detail project components.
I think there's a microphone behind you if you'd rather stand, or you're happy to pull up a chair and join the other.
That might be easier to do. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Luke DiStefano with Bowler Engineering, Southborough, Massachusetts. What I would like to do is basically expand a little bit on what Attorney Smith had laid out in terms of the overall site engineering associated with this particular project. As mentioned, it is a complete raise and rebuild of the existing facility that's there today. I think you're probably all very familiar with the intersection and the existing use. As noted, the site is currently utilized as an existing mobile mart gasoline facility with 6 multi-product gasoline dispensers situated beneath an overhead canopy. The 6 MPDs result in the ability to fuel 12 vehicles at any one given time, given that each dispenser can fuel off of either side. The site, under its current conditions, is basically fully developed. The mobile mart and the dispensers are situated basically in the center of the property. The site, under its existing condition, is accessed by one full movement curb cut off of Washington Street and a second full movement curb cut off of Central Street. Under the proposed condition, as mentioned, the applicant is looking to completely raise and rebuild the structure from the ground up. As shown on the rendering to my left, the proposed condition would have a 4,465 square foot all-town market convenience store with 5 multi-product gasoline dispensers situated beneath an overhead canopy directly in front or to the west side of that store. As you can see, the store is basically situated now in the northeast, or would be situated in the northeast corner of the property, with the canopy and fuel dispensers located out front or between the store and Washington Street. As mentioned, the proposal calls for a drive-through around the facility, and on the rendering you can see that basically the drive-through runs along the rear or eastern portion of the site with the pickup window being on the northern portion of the site or the left-hand side of the building. The fuel dispensers would be serviced by 3 new underground storage tanks. Under the existing condition, there are 4 storage tanks in the ground. Those would be removed and replaced with 3 state-of-the-art double-wall fiberglass underground storage tanks, complete with all the bells and whistles. Access to the property would continue to be provided via 2 curb cuts, one along Central and one along Washington. However, one distinct difference, based on conversations initially with the Zoning Board of Appeals and some of the traffic concerns, the Washington Street curb cut would now be a full movement in and a right turn out only curb cut. We'd basically be facilitating the right turn. We don't have a current condition rendering. You have there, okay. Okay, so the curb cut on Washington Street would be a right out. There is a raised concrete island that is proposed at that curb cut to, again, discourage left-hand movements out of the property. The proposed condition results in other improvements to the property, and primarily one big improvement is with stormwater management. Under the existing condition, the site does not meet the open space, the minimum open space requirement. It's short by about 500 to 600 square feet of green space. Under the proposed condition, we will be increasing green space by about 1,000 square feet. So it's, again, an improvement over the existing condition. And as you can see from the rendering, or if you've had an opportunity to review the landscape plan, you can see that not only are we increasing green space, but we're significantly enhancing the green space that's on the property right now. The site is, yes, sir? On the existing property?
Michael.
It's all primarily because the landscaping is generally around the edges. The landscaping is generally going to be low-lying landscaping. Obviously, we need to be cognizant of sight lines and visibility into and out of the property. And along the rear and northern side, the islands or the landscaped areas are pretty narrow. We can certainly look. We do have some retaining walls and some utilities back
Michael,
there.
I'd like the applicant to finish, and then I'm planning on going through the plans, and I have questions, and we're going to let the board, but we're going to let the applicant and his experts discuss the project first, and then we're going to hear from our experts, and then the board will ask their questions. So if we could hold our questions till after the presentation is done.
Okay, and in addition to the increase in green space, other enhancements to stormwater management will be proposed. Stormwater on site will now be collected completely within a contained drainage system through a series of trench drains and deep sump catch basins located on the property. All stormwater will then be basically transferred into an underground infiltration system located basically in the southern portion of the site, adjacent to the Central Street curb cut. So you will not only see major improvements to the quantity of stormwater exiting the property, but to the quality of the stormwater as well. So the new system will be in complete compliance with the stormwater management guidelines. Utilities will be all underground to the property. We do have all the required utilities around the property. So all new utilities will be brought in underground. And overall, we think that the proposal before you results in a major improvement to the existing property. And with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions the board has, or I'm happy to turn it over to Aaron Fredette with McMahon, who can give a brief presentation on traffic.
Why don't we hear from Aaron, then we'll ask questions of all.
Pardon me?
We'll hear from your expert next, and then we'll ask questions of all your panel after our experts have opined on the project. So You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, my name is Erin Fredette. I'm an engineer and project manager with McMahon Associates, the traffic consultant on the project. I'm going to briefly run through some of the methodologies that we use for the traffic analysis, as well as some of the meetings that we've had, both with town staff and Mass DOT, as well as the peer review conducted by GPI of our traffic study. If there's anything that you'd like to see in more detail or have any questions, I, of course, would be happy to answer those. We began by reviewing the project site and adjacent roadways and intersections to establish our study area, which in this case were the two existing site driveways and the intersection of Washington Street and Central Street. We conducted turning movement counts at each of those locations during the weekday morning peak period from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., during the weekday afternoon peak period from 4 to 6 p.m. There was some concern regarding the schools in the area and potentially having peak hours outside of those typical commuter peaks. We were able to review data provided by OCPC that actually looked at traffic counts at this particular intersection outside of those peak hours, and a review of that data indicated that the actual peak hour of the intersection does occur during those commuter peaks, and so we were able to use the data that we originally collected in September. Once we established our existing conditions, we projected out into the future. 7 years, which is industry standard for a project of this nature. We utilize a conservative background growth rate of 1% per year across the board at the intersection. We also included developments known at the time, which were the proposed Cumberland Farms, which is now built, the occupation of the former Shaws, as well as the former Friendly's, former Honeydew, I believe current Sonic proposal, all on Washington Street. We conducted trip generation associated with each of those projects or pulled information from previously submitted traffic impact studies, added that to our existing traffic volumes to result in our future no-build volumes. Once we established those, we looked at the number of project trips associated with the proposal. Under the current proposal in front of you, we established that there would be approximately 22 new vehicles during the weekday morning peak hour and approximately 20 new vehicles during the weekday afternoon peak hour. Now, at the request of the ZBA, we actually collected specific trip generation data for this type of land use. Typically, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, but because of the nature of this particular site with the convenience market, gas station, and Dunkin' Donuts drive-through, it was a little unique, and so we went out and conducted our own traffic counts at sites specific to Dunkin' Donuts with drive-through, gas station, and convenience market in order to truly capture the traffic impacts that would be associated with this project. Once we established those additional trips to the project site, we added them to our roadway network and conducted capacity analysis. We looked at the capacity analysis to try and determine the impacts to the adjacent intersection, as well as review operations of the proposed site driveways. Under the current proposal, we would expect the driveways to operate under capacity and reasonably well. We know that there is some conflict with the queues that extend from the intersection, but even with that, we would expect them to operate acceptably. And then we reviewed the intersection of Washington Street and Central Street, which I'm sure you're all aware has some traffic difficulties even today. And with those difficulties, we found that with the addition of our project, we really weren't impacting the intersection all that much more. At most, we would be adding a vehicle or two to the existing queues, or an overall average of 3 seconds of delay or less. And so although the project itself isn't expected to have a real impact at the intersection, the project is committed to looking at improvements at the intersection in order to improve upon the existing condition. Some of the items that we looked at were proposed signal timings. Right now, we notice that the clearance intervals at the intersection don't meet current standards. Those are the yellow and red times. And so as we reviewed in our safety analysis, we were finding that vehicles weren't making it all the way through the intersection before opposing movements were starting, causing quite a few safety issues. So we would propose bringing those clearance intervals up to industry standards. Additionally, in reviewing the proposed signal timings, we would suggest looking at the pedestrian crossing interval. We understand that there can be at times a lot of children, a lot of people out here with all the different land uses, and so we would propose to look at the pedestrian interval and make sure that that also meets current standards, and those have been changing recently as well. We also understand that OCPC has done a number of studies in the area, and we've been reviewing their proposal to restripe Central Street at this location. Their proposal would convert the eastbound and westbound approaches to this signal to include exclusive left turn lanes. And what that'll do is take turning movements out of the through traffic and separate those vehicles a little bit better. And it may not improve or decrease delay at the intersection, but it certainly would improve the safety at that intersection. And so we're committed to continuing to work with the town of Stoughton to identify those potential improvements, as well as with DOT, as this signal is owned by DOT, and anything that we would propose at this location would have to be approved by DOT and go through their processes as well. That said, we have had a couple meetings with DOT to discuss the project site, primarily access at this point, but in the future, if the project is to go forward, we continue to discuss the intersection improvements as well. And overall, they seem to be on board with our proposed access. They're particularly fond of restricting left turns out of the Washington Street access to improve safety. We also, as you can see in the aerial, right now the Washington Street curb cut is very wide. It's very close to the intersection. What we'll be doing is tightening that up and pushing it away from the intersection, removing some of those turning conflicts so close to Washington and Central. With that, I'd be happy to answer questions, or I guess turn it over to.
Great segue over to Mr. Tisdale, our town engineer.
Thanks, Joe. Mark Tisdale, town engineer. A little history, as Erin has mentioned, through the ZBA process with the drive-through, they required a special permit. That's why they were in front of the ZBA. They got the special permit last week. Traffic concerns were the biggest issue from my standpoint. Many of the issues have been addressed. A few of the issues that the town had when we met with Mass DOT were not in favor of those improvements, and since it's their intersection, they have the say on that. There are still some outstanding improvements, recommendations from our traffic engineer that need to be more detailed and shown on the plan, and I think they're aware of it, like the signalization upgrades. A little more correspondence with Mass DOT will probably need to occur to understand fully what needs to be done at the intersection. From a technical review standpoint, for things to do other than traffic, we have not done much on that as of this point, because we were not sure if the drive-through was going to get approved or not. So we are currently reviewing the revised plans that we received yesterday. We should have something out within the next week or so for the engineers.
Thank you, Mr. Tisdale. Ms. O'Toole, do you have anything to comment about the application, the plans, or?
Yes, I do. Through the chair, I'd like to just add onto what Mr. Tisdale, town engineer, I'm Noreen O'Toole, the town planner. Due to the fact that the project was just approved at the ZBA, what the planning board needs to do with the engineering department is we need to make sure that we have all those revisions in place, because I know the ZBA asked for some changes on the original plan, and we need to make sure that we're working from the same plan. And I think that it would be easier for the engineering office and the planning board if we could get a completed set of plans. We'd prefer that rather than getting pages and having to insert that. I think it's a little easier for us to make that decision and to compare, the ZBA with the planning board plans that are being submitted to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Next, I have a series of questions, and I think my first ones, as soon as I locate them, okay, are for Mr. Smith. You come back to the table. On your application, you asked for 4 waivers. I want to talk about whether I've heard some mixed, conflicting information this evening. Your site contractor mentioned that he's actually increasing the open space, and I see on here there's a request for waiving the 20% minimum landscape areas. You want to explain what your position?
Yes.
A little confused as to what you're what you want to do there.
Mr. Chairman, the original application that was submitted to the planning board required a waiver with respect to the open space area. After the first ZBA hearing, we amended the plan, which was submitted both to the ZBA as well as the planning board. One of the more significant changes included a reduction in the size of the actual proposed building, which allowed us to comply with this 20% landscape area requirement as set forth in the site plan review regulations.
So you'll be withdrawing that, that waiver request?
That's correct.
Okay, could we have something, a revised page or whatever showing that, or a letter from you withdrawing that particular, the next one I'm familiar with, I read your narrative. You're going to be using LED lights, which we would have told you we now require anyway. And along those lines, since I'm talking about energy use, the town, at its most recent town meeting, I shouldn't say that last spring's town meeting, it wasn't our most recent, approved the stretch code, and as a result of that, the planning board has added a requirement of an electric charging station at all commercial development. And the several projects that we've approved have all had a charging station. Does not have to be free to the public. The ones that are operating in the city of Boston are through a nationwide company like ChargePoint, but there are, I believe, several others. They have one station can charge 2 cars at once. And now I want to move into the plans themselves. Let's take a step back to the narrative. You mentioned that the dumpster will be surrounded by a vinyl fence. We also require that the gates be vinyl as well. And as long as we're talking about vinyl, I know that project we just approved at Cumberland, we required a vinyl fence along the border between the next project, which in your case would be the Daddy's Ice Cream Complex on the left, going all the way back and meeting the arborvitaes on the back side. So you have a natural fence that starts with the arborvitaes, and I think you're leaving them according to the plans. That's correct?
Those are actually not on our property, those are on the property behind, but they're above the retaining wall that's currently there, so you can still be safe.
So, and I think that there's a piece of concrete that's in the back there that, so that particular area we want fenced, a 8-foot vinyl fence that goes all the way and ends at the arborvitaes.
I asked where you would like that side fence to start. I'm just a little worried about site view. I proposed the site that will be going
Correct. That's fine. The next point you partially addressed with tonight's presentation, the color renderings that we have are really not the true, we were provided with this, some of which are the current site, some of which is a building someplace else because we're not getting a subway. So
One's a song.
I see that we do have renderings tonight. I'd like a set of those for the board to look at. Along the lines, I'd like to see some samples of what the external surface is made out of. Is it vinyl? Is it a cedar clapboard? Is it hardy board? Would like a sample of that as well as the colors that you're going to be using on the building. We didn't have any rear elevations. I see we have them this evening on the, I have to switch glasses here, on the drawings that you provided. But I don't see the mechanicals on there. Can somebody show me where the mechanicals will be?
Electrical panel. The electrical panel where the
What about the compressors? Now, what's on the side? Do you have a side view of that elevation? So I can see the cut down the middle. No, I'm trying to see let's go to the top. No, yeah, I guess you can show me there. Where's the compressor going to be?
they will sit on here. This actually goes down about 3 feet, and it houses all the AC units and compressors.
So if you walk around the building, you'll see the compressors.
No.
Unless you're up on a ladder, no. If you're down on, ground level, you cannot see them. They sit down. This is, like I said, this is about a 3-foot knee wall that comes up right here, and the compressors actually sit down on another level. They'll be below the wall, correct. So,
Well, I'd like to see something on your next set of drawings that show that much, a little bit more clearly than, because we usually require a white screening, a white vinyl screening of those. If you look at the Cumberland Farms, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Can you, on that flat part of the roof there, on the parapet that you have, that wall, yeah, could you run some kind of a fence and dress it up a little bit instead of just looking at something flat? I realize the roof is down under the 3 feet, but if you ran like a 2-foot fence on top of that 3-foot wall, it might dress it up a little bit. You follow me?
I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Pardon me?
I wouldn't be opposed to that. There would have to be an open area where there could be access to it, so there would have to be a break in it, but
Yeah, I think you ought to look at the Cumberland Farms, because I think they have a gate that they put in there for service access.
on the roof.
Yeah. If you drive from the Lincoln Street entrance to the Cumberland Farms, you'll see this architectural detail that I'm talking about. Okay. Now I want to talk about the landscape plan.
I'm not in favor of giving them the 20-degree reduction on the.
They're not asking for a reduction.
But
He
they
said
were.
that.
The open space.
He's not asking for a reduction.
I'm not in the way, am I, Joe?
First, the landscape schedule that you have on here is not per our typical disclosure. We want the caliper. In addition to that, we want color samples of all the shrubbery. We want the size at planting on here. And that's part of our examination for occupancy, is that we look at the plantings after they're all in the ground. I'd like as I said, color pictures of all the items, and I would suspect as you're, I don't know if anybody's knowledgeable about these, but I suspect they're all green. Is there anything other than the lilies that's a different color? I know there's yellow lilies here, but that's it. I think it's all green. If you look at some of the recent projects we've approved, we've asked for diversity of color, not just all green. We'd like flowers, we'd like some red, something variegated in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, is there an example or a couple examples of other projects that?
Yes, if you could stop by to see Ms. O'Toole, she'll show you the landscape plans for the Page Street Hotel and the Malcolm Parsons Building on Washington Street. Mr. Samarco mentioned earlier about trees. I think that the only thing I saw in here that was of any significance was something that was 18 to 24, and that's not a tree as far as I'm concerned. We'd like to see something, the Cumberland Farms, if you drive by there, you'll see that they have trees in the front that are 10 to 12 feet at planting. Our master plan talked about the dressing up of Washington Street. It's a priority of the town, and that's pursuant to that master plan, all the projects coming before us. And as I said, Mr. Smith asked for an example, and suggest you're looking at coming into the engineering department and looking at those plans. I was looking at the second page of that landscaping, which is the landscape notes and detail, and I believe that it talks about the watering requirement being the applicant's responsibility until the trees, shrubs take. Our practice, our experience is that landscaping dies about several months after unless it's properly watered. We'd like to see irrigation at all these major, at all the landscape beds. If you haven't already been apprised, we require a landscape maintenance plan to be recorded with a decision. And so to make sure that the landscaping is maintained both in terms of pruning and in terms of watering, the agreement is required. Just want to make you aware in case you're not aware of that. And going back to Mr. Samarco's request, not only would I like to see some taller trees, but I'd like to see some more trees. And perhaps some flowers other than the lilies. And they can be seasonal. Some of the other plans that we've had talk about seasonal plantings.
Add something to what the chairman mentioned about landscaping, is we will require an operational and a maintenance plan, a separate document, and you will be required to register that at the Registry of Deeds and bring us back the receipt. We need to know that those trees and those plantings will be taken care of by the company.
I have a question of McMahon. The traffic, you mentioned Sonic. I just want to confirm my understanding. When you looked at the Sonic is a unique business, am I right? Isn't it kind of almost like a cult following? People travel distances to go to the Sonic, whereas they might not travel 10, 15 miles to go to a McDonald's in a particular location.
Quite possibly. It certainly is more novel than a McDonald's.
Well, when you did your traffic study, what did you find out about Sonic and the public draw?
Well, we utilized IT because that was the data we had available, and there wasn't, as far as we knew, an updated traffic study for the new proposal. And so we utilized a methodology that looked at the Sonic as a fast food restaurant based on square footage. So as you said, that may not capture the novelty of a Sonic. However, our background growth rate of 1% generated an additional over 200 vehicles at our Washington and Central Street intersection, and so we would expect any additional trip generation with the Sonic that wasn't captured in our specific trip generation calculated would be captured in that background growth rate.
I know when I said that, you kind of gave me a strange reaction. Are you aware of the fact that, that Sonic does have a so-called cult following in certain age groups?
I don't know about Sonics.
Well,
Yeah, I like my Big Macs.
I was just curious because my own understanding of the Sonic and the locations and the business model is that they don't, like a McDonald's or a other Burger Kings, et cetera, don't populate the areas. They create great distances and people drive. And I believe the closest one to Stoughton would be Attleboro. In the other direction, it's on a Route 1 in Peabody. So that does create that's quite a radius for travel. But I was just curious of your own industry experience in rating the traffic patterns of Sonic.
Yeah.
You're just worried about the traffic at that intersection. It's not the fraps. One final point, and I don't know who can address this. You're more than doubling the size of the convenience aspect of the project. Am I right, Mr. Smith?
Correct.
I see one of your experts shaking his
Convenience.
head.
Yes.
And will there be more pumps than is there's right now? No more pumps. But you'll have to acknowledge that we do have more gas stations in Stoughton than when you thought about this project. We have extra pumps. If you look at the number of pumps available on Washington Street, we have more pumps now than we've ever had, even if you don't expand yours. We have 4 convenience stores within not even a stone's throw of each other. We have one at the Tedeschi's, we have one at the car wash, we have one at the New Cumberland Farms, and we have one at your location. So that's 4 convenience stores within a close proximity. In addition to the Dunkin' Donuts, which we have within, even I can walk to the Dunkin' Donuts that exists. My point being is that we have a lot of businesses that compete with yours in a short proximity. The town is engaging in a redevelopment plan for the square. So we're very concerned about abandoned and dilapidated and unoccupied buildings. And the concern that I have, and perhaps it's shared by other members of the board, is the town certainly doesn't want to see boarded up stores as a result of new projects coming in town. So have you done any studies to show whether the addition of all of this square footage of retail and fast food, what impact that will have on the market, or what is the market on Washington Street for your products? And will somebody end up going out of business as a result of this and abandoning a location? Have you done any studies to this effect?
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Chairman.
So you don't know what the economic impact of your expansion will have on the area?
We know that my client has its own internal business modeling that it does with respect to what certain uses at a particular location in a particular market, and how they may or may not compete with other competitors that are in and around the neighborhood. But there's been no independent third-party study that's been done with respect to any type of an economic impact.
Like you did with the traffic study?
That's correct.
Well, I would certainly like to see some data along those lines, because we have a Burger King going across the street. As I said, we have lots of convenience stores. We have the new Price Right going in. The last thing that we want to see is anything. We work very hard to develop our town, And we don't want to see abandoned sites, especially along 138. I don't know if any board members share my concerns about seeing something done along the lines of a review, economic impact review. And this is not how many jobs you can create or how much tax revenue you can bring to the town, but what the saturation point would be for all the various businesses that you provide to at this location. And it's a lot. It's, you're substantially, this building and its operations are 4 times as large as what exists there today. I know for a fact that the drive-through should add 35% to the Dunkin' Donuts because I represent some franchises. So I can only imagine what it'll do to the convenience store when you have more gondolas than you have right now in there. So I guess I see some other heads shaking on the board, so I think we'd like to see some.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask, we've had an extensive discussion with respect to the landscaping, and you provided us with some other examples of other projects, some recent projects that we could observe in that regard. Has the board made this request to other recent projects? For example, the Cumberland Farms project was an economic.
Well, we're reaching a saturation point at that intersection that, as far as businesses are concerned, and it just, at this point, the board, I think, is concerned that we're going to, there's going to be some fallout. We'd like to make sure that we're supporting a project that will not take the town a step backwards in terms of locations that are abandoned.
So
as far as economic impact, we have the next group that comes in here has done a substantial economic impact analysis about their project. It's not a impact that as I'm describing it in terms of competition disappearing, but it's an impact on the town. So we do look at the economic impact in various ways. Sometimes it's a positive cash flow to the town. In this particular case, the concern is that we develop sites and they don't get boarded up 6 or 8 months later. No, they might, but some other.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's been expressed by yourself and I think perhaps Ms. O'Toole that there is Washington Street in particular it's an active area. It's a major commercial corridor within the town. I've gotten to know the area pretty well, having come out here for various meetings, and there's a lot going on in Stoughton. I think I'm not sure what would come of us requiring my client to perform an economic impact analysis to determine.
Well, I see it as some things you would have done as part of a decision to put millions of dollars into the site.
But one of the conclusions you want us to provide to the board is our determination or some third party's consultant's determination as to whether the risk of area competitors and whether they will be able to sustain their competitive place in and along Washington Street or within the town based on the fact that this project is being developed? That's the main conclusion that you're trying to have us research?
The main conclusion is you have various lines of business that you're operating at the site. They compete with various businesses in the area. Well, I'd be the last person to suggest anything that's anti-competitive, but on the same token, I would like to see that we don't have other businesses disappearing as a result of your project. So in terms of expanding to the extent that you have, there must be some analysis that was done that shows that there's a demand for increased services at your site. and that the existing services do not satisfy this need. And this is what I'm talking about. Ms. O'Toole, do you have anything to add to this?
I think what the chairman is alluding to is on your marketing division, and, you know, redoing the mobile station and the demand for it out there. We're just looking for some numbers for the demand for your particular convenience store drive-through. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, I think that's a fair
Yes.
representation.
And with respect to the Cumberland Farms project that was recently approved, built, and that is now in operation, I think you were saying, Mr. Chairman, that such a study was not required or requested of them.
That project came before yours, and it just, as I said, sometimes it's the fourth or fifth project of the same type, and you represent businesses that have been repeated recently, and now we have a concentration of those businesses. And the question becomes, have we oversaturated the market in any one of those areas? We have another gas station that we didn't have before.
But this, with all due respect, this site is in existence. The Cumberland Farms was not there. My understanding is they
It was right across
relocated.
the street. Cumberland Farms is right across the street.
Okay, and how large was that, the previous location? How many times larger was that building?
I'm sorry.
Was, where they were previously, was that? It was small. It was small, okay. And so because it just, you're saying that the town is at a tipping point now in terms of saturation and...
I'm not a marketing person, but I think that a reasonable person would be concerned about the, whether that there might somehow be an impact with somebody disappearing, and we just would like to see some analysis from your client on that you must have performed for yourself to make that kind of investment. And really, that's what we're talking about. Does anybody else from the board have any other comments about the project? I don't want to monopolize all the time. Pardon me, Ms. Jard? Okay. Mr. Smarco?
I know you're going to go over all these fast food places. On the record, I can see 1, 2, 3 stores going out of business, which they have nothing to do with. If you go, there's 3 stores that are in trouble. How do I know? Because they go there. And what they're doing, and 3 stores that I know of, they need a lot of help. They don't know how to market whatever they're doing. So maybe the person of this company knows what he's doing. And he has a good spot, he has a good spot.
I think that, Mr. Samarco, we're just trying to, we're doing so much work in the square to inhabit abandoned storefronts that we don't need to add at any other place in town. And I guess I think we've pretty much discussed that one.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other thing to say about the plans at this stage?
Not at this time.
Okay. Hearing same, Mr. Smith, when would you like to come back? When would you like me to continue this public hearing?
How much time? Mr. Chairman, before we address the timing for the continuance, we'd like to know if there are any other comments from the public, so we have all comments. And
I did pull the board, and I think their comments are their reserving comments.
That's from
for
the board.
Revised set of plans.
That's the board. What about from the
Public, he's talking about the
I
public.
was just going to acknowledge a few hands that I see in the audience.
Okay, can we do that
Mr.
first?
Souza?
David Souza, 53 Glover Drive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple concerns. You say a right-hand turn only onto Washington Street. What about Central Street? Central Street is very dangerous, first thing in the morning, first thing in the afternoon. There's a lot of kids crossing. I'd like to see some type of signal, along with you guys talk with Mass DOT to put some type of signal for the kids to cross and everything else. I understand there's an existing gas station, so I'm okay with that, because I don't want to see more gas stations going up, but you do have one there, and I like the plan, but you gotta look at safety more than anything else. I'm not gonna put the residents into jeopardy coming out of the corner of the Central Street. It is very dangerous. So if you're gonna make a right turn only on Washington Street, I recommend you make a right turn only on Central Street too. Because they're coming out of Central Street, taking a left, they're crossing 2 lanes to go into another 2-lane traffic, taking a left. Someone's gonna get killed. And I don't want that in our town. Thank you.
Any other member of the public that would like to say something about this project at the stage? And bear in mind that this is not the last hearing. So if you think of something on your way home, you need not think that you lost your opportunity. There'll be at least one more public hearing. So, but in any event, would anybody else like to say something from the public? Hearing none, Mr. Smith, did you?
Can we have enough? Ms. Fredette's going to respond to the comment from...
Sure.
So we did look at restricting left turns out of the Central Street driveway, because that was a concern of the ZBA as well. And we ultimately talked it over with Mass DOT as well. And in the end, we determined that restricting left turns at that location and at the Washington Street location would cause confusion, resulting in poor on-site circulation, but also would potentially push those movements elsewhere in the network. So making illegal U-turns on Washington Street or turning around in people's driveways and whatnot. So in order to limit the safety impact elsewhere, we decided to allow full access at that driveway. In terms of the 2 lanes coming westbound on Central Street, that could potentially be addressed as part of the restriping that we'd be looking into to see if, at the driveway, maybe it's only 1 lane so that there's fewer conflicting movements right there, but all stuff that we would look into with Mass DOT and the town engineer.
Mr. Cohn, you had your hand up. State your name and address for the record.
My name is Robert Cohn, 134 Kotlik Street in Stoughton. What this lady forgot to mention was it's one of the 10th worst intersection in the state. I don't care what DOT has to say. The bottom line here is, listening to her survey, they're going to do what they're going to do. We, the citizens of this town, are going to do what we have to do. And if it means that we're going to have to fight on this, we will come here in force and make sure we get what we want. Do you understand that? Okay, thank you.
Anybody else from the public? Back to my original question, Mr. Smith, when would you think you're going to be ready to come back?
She give us a full set of renderings.
Moment, Mr. Chair.
We have 2 available dates. We have May 14th and we have May 28th.
And Mr. Smith, just for the record, we would like the plans a week in advance of the hearing. Just bear that in mind in your decision to continue.
Okay. We'd like to continue to the 28th.
Yeah. So that would be May 28th at 8 p.m.
I need a motion from the, to continue this public hearing until May 20th. At what time?
8 p.m.
A second for that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
No,
We've got to fold up one project and kind of clear the decks here. Okay, for members of the public and those of you that are tuning in to this meeting of the Planning Board, our next item of business is a public information session that the Planning Board is holding for those interested in the Pleasant Street Senior Housing District Overlay District zoning bylaw that's going to be in front of town meeting. Just explain to everybody what will occur is the project applicant will be allowed to make a presentation. If the board has any questions, the board will ask the applicant and/or his representative the questions. After that, the members of the public will be allowed to ask questions. One person will speak at a time. As you saw from the last hearing, we'll ask you to come up and identify yourself, your name and address for the record, and please one person at a time speaking and at the microphone. So I guess at this point I want a motion to open that agenda item.
Motion open.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Simons? You need time to set up your...
Chairman, members of the board, I know that it is 10 after 8. We had told everybody in the community that this wasn't actually going to start being heard until 8:30. I know this is an imposition on the time of the board. It's another 20 minutes out of your life. But I would hate for people to turn up at 8:30 and then to find out that we were already into the presentation and they've missed what may be the relevant parts of the presentation for their purposes. So I'd like to ask the board to consider adjourning for 20 minutes to allow everybody else to get here in time so they will see the entire presentation. That will also give us time to set up our, we've got a PowerPoint that we're going to try and use
Yes.
as well. Give us time to do.
Mr. Samarco, would you...
Make a motion that we adjourn for 20 minutes to 11:30.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll be going off camera. Okay, we're back on the record. Just for those of you who are tuning in, the issue on our agenda at this point in the evening is a public information session for the residents of Precinct 1 regarding the Pleasant Street Senior Housing Overlay District.
Motion.
Do they have a motion to reopen the meeting?
Motion to reopen, please.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, again, just to reiterate, Mr. Simons will be up doing a presentation, and then at the end of that, if the board has any questions for him, the board will then ask questions, and then it'll be open to the members of the public, one at a time, being recognized by the chair and coming to the microphone. Speaking, please, one at a time. Mr. Simons, you have the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I want to thank the board for giving us the opportunity to meet with the neighborhood. I'd like to thank Ms. O'Toole for facilitating this for us. It was her idea, and we're very grateful for this opportunity. Before I start, we're going to use the PowerPoint. I'd just like to make sure that everybody who's interested can see what's on that screen from where they're sitting. Okay? If not, I'd ask you to move forward so that you can see, because without the information on the screen, this will be pointless, okay? So my name is Len Simons. I'm the attorney for Calamar Properties. I have with me tonight Chris Trevisani, who is Calamar Properties, and Margaret Murphy, who is a real estate consultant, who is reaching out to the community and helping organize various aspects of this development. For the purposes of contact, questions can be directed preferably to Margaret after the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. If you can't get hold of Margaret, or you have something that you feel is more appropriately addressed by me as counsel, please contact me. I've given out a lot of my cards over the last few days. If you want a card from me after the meeting, please just stop and ask me. The one thing that I have asked as we've been through this process with the town is that we are asking people to try and make decisions based on accurate information. And I apologize to those of you on Pleasant Street and some of the surrounding streets that we did not get to you with this information before tonight. If I've done one thing wrong during this process, it's not having contacted you earlier than we did. It was always the plan to contact you. We did make contact with some of the people on Low Avenue early in the process. But we're here now, and what we want to do now is move forward and try and provide you with that basic information. The object of the exercise for me tonight, in part, is not to try and turn any of you into avid supporters of what Calamar is proposing to do here. We understand that this is a well-established community. A lot of you have been here for a very long time, and that the change that we're proposing is threatening to you, okay? What I am hoping to do is to try and make you feel somewhat more comfortable with what's being proposed. I don't expect for you to stand up and cheer for me at the end of this, okay? But if any of you feel more comfortable having been given the facts and the background and the context for this, and to understand what some of the alternatives are so that you can make a rational, reasonable choice about what you want to do about this proposal, then I have achieved my objective and I can go home satisfied tonight. So what I'm going to do is start the PowerPoint, and I'm going to give you some context and some background, okay? And then after I've been through that process, I'm going to talk more specifically about the actual project itself. So just bear with me. And then at the end of my presentation, as Mr. Scardino has already told you, we'll be available to answer any and all questions that you may have, okay? So as part of the warrant for the spring town meeting, we have Article 48. This is something that we drafted together to permit this particular development on one parcel of land in Stoughton. Now, this is an artist's rendering of what it is that we're proposing to build. This is not imaginary. What happens to produce one of these, for those of you who are not familiar, is that all the engineering information that's developed at great expense by Calamar, all the architectural work that's been done by Calamar, is fed into a program that the architects control, and based on that, and with information regarding the type of materials that we're proposing to use, they produce a relatively accurate picture of what this will look like. And the view that you have here is what this will look like if you were standing in our parking lot, having just parked your car, and you're walking towards our building, okay? This is proposed to be a senior community. There will not be anybody allowed to sign a lease in this building who is under the age of 62. Calamar does not do any other kind of development other than senior communities. And this is not a community that will have any medical component to it whatsoever. It is purely for people who are able to live independently at 62 and have decided that they want to downsize and live in a community of similar people. It is a community. Calamar builds communities, okay? This is the zoning plan that we submitted as part of our town warrant, okay? And you can see Pleasant Street coming down here. The area inside the dotted lines is the area that we are proposing to rezone. Now, you may ask yourselves, why is this only applicable in one area? And the answer is that we are aware that the town is currently in a rezoning mode. The town planner and you have special counsel are working very, very hard, as is the planning board, to come up with a series of changes to town meeting, to the zoning bylaw to propose to town meeting. The schedule for that is not yet determined, and the content of those changes is not yet determined. But what we decided we wanted to do was to propose zoning for one location that would not have any ripple effects anywhere else in town, okay? We do not want to incur the law of unintended consequences by proposing a more general rezoning that would run into problems elsewhere. So this is confined solely to the area within the red lines. Let me give you a little history. Some of you are already very aware of this because I know that some of you were in the town meeting last spring. You may ask yourselves whether or not senior housing has previously been proposed in town. And the answer is yes, it was. At your last spring town meeting, by I think almost a unanimous vote of town meeting, and I was involved in this because I represent the owners of this site. The former Solomon Schechter School at 710 Turnpike Street was rezoned for senior housing. That's a building that's been empty for many years, as you know. Unfortunately, the rezoning that was proposed was done in a very, very narrow way, and the only entity that was capable of taking advantage of that rezoning and creating that additional senior housing was the Stoughton Housing Authority. As many of you are also aware, the Housing Authority is currently in quite a state, and it is not in a situation where it can pursue senior housing anywhere in town at all. It's out of the development business for the foreseeable future. It's basically in a receivership that's being run by the state. The Housing Authority has terminated its purchase and sale agreement for 710 Turnpike Street. It's not doing any more development anywhere, not for the foreseeable future until it gets its other problems resolved. Why did I tell you that? Well, the answer to that question is here, okay? Most of the site that we're proposing to build on is currently zoned general business. I was told, I'm not sure it's 100% accurate, but I was told anecdotally a couple of days ago by someone who works in town hall that that zoning was put in place in the 1970s. I have not gone back to verify that. The general business zone zoning allows senior housing as of right now, as we're sitting here. But again, it's only allowed if it's done by the Stoughton Housing Authority. And as I just pointed out to you, the Housing Authority is out of the development business. But the point I'm making here is this. Town meeting has already decided, back in the mid-70s, I was told, that senior housing is an appropriate use for this site. The essence of what we're proposing is to substitute my client Calamar Properties for the Stoughton Housing Authority to allow Calamar to do with its own money what the Stoughton Housing Authority would otherwise have been allowed to do. Thanks, Mike. This is an extract from your current zoning bylaw that supports what I just told you. The language on the left by this number 9 states that the principal use, housing for the elderly, is allowed in a general business zone. That's what that S allows. That S, just for the purposes of completing the detail, indicates that it was originally allowed with a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. This zoning was put in place before the town had a site plan review bylaw, which has substituted the planning board for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And under our zoning approval, if it's adopted at town meeting, we would have to come back in front of the planning board and go through site plan review, which, by the way, would give this community another bite at the apple to bring your concerns to the planning board, have them considered, and if the planning board finds that your concerns should be addressed, they can be included in the site plan approval as a special condition, and we would be bound to observe those conditions. So keep in mind that even if this gets through town meeting, you can be back here in front of the planning board when we give a complete presentation on all the details, down to the finest engineering details relating to drainage, parking, you name it, lighting. You'll have a second bite at the apple to do that, okay? Can you go back a second, Margaret? So you may be asking yourselves, why have I lined out part of the language under number 9? If you were to look at the state statutes that are referenced here, they are references to the Stoughton Housing Authority. This is the provision that says that in the general business zone, housing for the elderly was allowed as of right by, I should take that back, housing for the elderly was allowed with a special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. The point being, again, that this is already an allowed use on this land. And the only difference between what we're proposing and what the Housing Authority could already do is the fact that it's a different developer. It's not the Housing Authority, it's Calamar, okay? But that's an allowed use. So, just to step back for a second, our proposal allows senior housing by a private developer on one parcel of land at 600 Greer Pleasant Street. The zoning change is limited to this one parcel and does not affect any other land in Stoughton. Now, I'm going to go into part of the presentation that is difficult to present to you, okay? Because I take a real risk here, that the perception is that I or Calamar is threatening this community. And I want to make one thing really clear here, okay? Calamar only does senior housing, okay? If town meeting does not approve this zoning change, Calamar will be out of town, gone, okay? They don't do anything except senior housing. Please keep that in mind as I go through this next part of the presentation, because what I am attempting to do is to get the community to consider the alternatives that are available to it under the current zoning bylaw, and to make a decision about which of those alternatives you would prefer when you consider what Calamar is proposing, okay? This is not a threat. Calamar will never, ever do anything on this site other than senior housing, okay? The language that you're looking at on this screen is taken verbatim from your current zoning bylaw. And what this tells you is the current allowed as of right uses under the current zoning bylaw for everything that's zoned general business, okay? In a thumbnail, restaurants, retail, furniture stores, you name it. I mean, it's zoned commercial currently, okay? Let's just go. Business or repair services, trade or professional schools, a bakery. Okay. Now, to try and put that in a little context for you, we went to the trouble and expense of having our engineers do enough work on this site to be able to figure out, under the current dimensional controls of your bylaw, what could be built as of right on this site, okay? And the answer is that what you're looking at is a 70,000 square foot building and about 250 parking spaces. Now, we have not fully engineered this because it's a very expensive process, but we did enough work to know that this is feasible. Remember, Calamar is not going to do this, but somebody else could. If somebody wanted to put a 70,000 square foot building on that site, they could come in front of the planning board, go through a site plan review process, which the law says, since the underlying uses are as of right, cannot be denied, okay? It's not a discretionary permit. The planning board has to grant the permit. It can grant the permit with conditions, but it can't be denied. And if they had plans done, as I'm standing here now today, within 3 months, they could be into construction for that building, okay? And there's nothing anybody can do, because these are as-of-right uses. And the law mandates that if it's an as-of-right use by zoning bylaw, the owner cannot be denied the right to put the land to that use. So let me give you a little bit of detail now about what we're proposing, okay? And probably, I'm hoping that given the amount of information that's been in the penny saver and the mailings we've done to town meeting members, that most of this is familiar to you already. 128 one and two bedroom apartments, including 15 affordable apartments. Now, when my client first approached me about representing them for this particular project, one of the first things I did was to have them watch a video from last spring's town meeting that addressed the proposed rezoning of the Schmood. And the reason that I did that was that I thought that that showed in a nutshell what the hot button issues are for the town of Stoughton in terms of development. And one of the hot button issues is, dare I say this, 40B, okay? The reason that we've already volunteered, without anybody asking us to do this, to include 15 affordable apartments, is that that is designed to keep the town's safety margin, its protection against having 40Bs jammed down its throat, at 11.24%. Now, I'm hoping that number means something to all, if not most of you. The law says that if more than 10% of your housing is low, moderate income, the 40B law does not apply to you, okay? Stoughton has got itself to 11.24%. We took our 128 apartments, okay, and we calculated how many of those had to be low, moderate income housing to keep the town at 11.24%. And that's why those 15 affordable units are in the mix from the get-go, okay? They're going to have fully equipped kitchens, washer dryers. There's going to be a community room, an exercise room, an outdoor patio, all the knobs, bells, and whistles. And the prices, the rents are actually going to be very moderate. One bedroom market rate unit starts at approximately $1,200. Okay? As an aside, just based on the information we've put in the penny saver, we've already got 60 people from Stoughton on a waiting list who are interested. Not all of them will qualify, not all of them will follow through, and in the interim, while this is going through, some of them will find places to live elsewhere. The bottom line is that there's a tremendous amount of interest from the senior community in Stoughton in this particular project. There is no other senior housing, rental housing available that I'm aware of in the town. And we've done no outreach at all to any other towns outside of Stoughton. This is purely Stoughton residents. So there's a tremendous demand here. So let's consider what our project would mean for the neighborhood. It eliminates the possibility of this 10 acres being put to any commercial use. While the building is a good-sized building, okay, its use is residential, and its use is limited to people 62 plus. What does that mean? Little nighttime or weekend activity. Not much traffic generated from it at all. No crime. There'll be some crime, but basically nothing that would affect any statistics. No loud parties. I mean, there's no teenagers. There's no college kids. There's no 20-somethings or 30-somethings looking to have a good time, okay? This is a community of people who've deliberately chosen to live in a senior community. No loud trucks. You're not going to have trucks going in and out all hours of the day and night, collecting dumpsters, no backup horns. You'll get a moving truck every now and then, and of course there'll be a truck to take the refuse out. But it's not like you're going to be having trucks going in and out of there at all hours of the day and night. I happen to live, unfortunately, I'm about to move, I hope, but I happen to live right now close to a couple of restaurants. I get woken up at 5 in the morning because there's somebody collecting bottles and dumpsters and God knows what else. And no restaurant dumpsters. Restaurants are an allowed use in a GB zone. You're not going to have dumpsters. You're not going to have trash overflowing the parking lot and blowing into your property. You're not going to have kids dumping things out of cars after they finish slurping down their Cokes and eating their burgers, okay? None of that. It's a senior community, all right? So now let's talk about what the alternative would be if, in fact, the Calamar project does not go ahead. There are 3 possibilities, okay? One is that the Hansons, who are in the room, the Hansons will leave the land as it is. Nothing will happen. One is that Calamar will develop it, and the third is that some third party, I have no idea who, will buy this, because at some price, this is a valuable site for a developer. It's what they call shovel-ready, okay? The first option is not on the table. I talked to Mr. Hanson the other day, and he makes no bones about it. He can't afford to keep this property because he's lost his tax exemption. So it's going to get sold one way or the other. It's going to go, what will actually happen is that if town meeting turns this down, the next day it will go back on the market. Now, some of you may be thinking that, well, that's okay, because at the next town meeting, we can change the zoning so this is not a possibility anymore. Not the way it works. The law says that if you file a subdivision plan with the planning board, that freezes your zoning for 8 years. And no changes that town meeting makes for that next 8 years will have any effect on the fact that the current zoning, which is frozen by the subdivision plan, allows all these commercial uses. So now the Hansons have an 8-year window in which to find a purchaser for this property. And that's what they'll do, because they're going to sell it. They're going to sell it. This is going to get sold. It's not staying empty land under any scenario whatsoever. Okay? Let me talk to you about some of the benefits for the town from what Calamar is proposing. One of the standard documents for development now is a thing called a fiscal impact report. What happens is Calamar hires a consultant. He goes and looks at different components of what makes up the fiscal picture from this development for the town. And basically what that consists of, what is the revenue to the town from this? Okay? So we talked to the assessor's office, and based on the numbers that we gave them, they estimate that between the excise and the real estate tax, it will generate $283,000 a year. Okay? Then we talked to the fire chief and the police chief, okay, to find out what are the costs incurred by the municipality in servicing this building. There is no cost for the schools, because again, there are no school kids here. No child can legally live in this building, and if they can't legally live in this building, they cannot be registered for school in Stoughton, okay? Based on what the fire chief and the police chief told us, it would cost the town about $99,000 a year for fire, ambulance, and police service to this building. Okay? That gives us a net of about $184,000. In addition to that, there are one-time fees, building permit fees, sewer connection fees, water connection fees of over $200,000. Okay? So there is a definite fiscal benefit for the town. Now, you can say to me, wait a minute, those are your numbers, okay? How do we know you didn't cut the books? Well, the town thought of that because they required that our fiscal report was peer-reviewed by a consultant that the planning board picked. It's actually counsel to the planning board who picked it. And earlier on this evening, I understand that the peer reviews were released by the planning board for public consumption. Okay? I have not read it in detail. I scanned, because I didn't get it until I walked in here tonight, but I scanned the conclusions. And I believe that the peer review says that the minimum that the town will see out of this as a net after payment for all municipal services is about $20,000 less than we had estimated. They think it's about $165,000. Still a considerable number. The bottom line is that the town's own fiscal peer review has basically confirmed that there's a distinct financial benefit for the town. Now, I don't know how many police officers, teachers, firemen could be hired for $165,000, but that's money that's not currently available, that if they wanted to hire another couple of teachers, it would have to be raised some other way, probably through real estate taxes. There's a distinct, confirmed fiscal benefit for the town. So we know that a hot button topic for you guys is the traffic on Pleasant Street. I mean, I've sat in that traffic and I know what you're talking about. I'm glad I don't have to do it every day. So we went out and, again, without being asked by the town, we hired our own traffic consultant to make recommendations and to tell us whether or not we were going to be making a difficult situation worse for the neighborhood, okay? We gave that report to the town, and the town took the same approach with the traffic report that it took with the physical report, which is, that's your consultant, you paid him, we want our own consultant to review what you've told us and tell us whether or not it's accurate, okay? And again, that was one of the reports that was released tonight by the planning board. I haven't read it in detail, I've just read the conclusions. But the bottom line is that based on the conclusions in the peer review, we got it right, okay? Before I talk about this in any detail, let me point out one other item to you. The town, actually, the traffic consultant the town used is also working for the town on trying to improve, amongst other things, the intersection at Central and Pleasant. And if you look at the warrant for the town meeting, you will find that there's an item for $50,000 that the town is asking town meeting to approve, and it's to make the improvements to that intersection that the town's own engineers, own consultants have recommended. From what when I was last time, well, a couple of times ago when I was in this room, I actually heard GPI, the town's traffic consultant, make a presentation to the selectmen about what they were proposing to do. And the gist of it is creating an extra left turn lane. The mechanical equipment in the lights is dated, partially broken, hasn't been updated. The software that controls the light needs to be updated. And that generally is what the $50,000 is for. And apart from anything else, that will hopefully, I'm not saying it's going to fix your problem, but hopefully improve the situation at that intersection. I think it stands to reason that, just from a common sense perspective, that a community of seniors is not going to generate huge amounts of traffic, okay? A lot of the people who rent from us are singles, okay? There may not be 2 or 3 people in these apartments. A lot of apartments will just have one car attached to it. A lot of our residents are retired, do not need to go in and out at peak traffic times, okay? Run their own schedules. According to the traffic engineers, during the morning peak hours, which is between 7:30 and 9 in the morning, we will generate 25 new car trips in 1 hour, okay? During school dismissal in the afternoon, 40 new car trips. And in the evening, peak hours between about 4:30 and 6, 32 new car trips. Now, just looking at that without any context, you may think that that's a lot of cars. The amount of traffic per day going up Pleasant Street towards the lights at Central is 4,700 cars a day, just going in that one direction. So when you're looking at these numbers, put it in that context, okay? This is a drop in the bucket. Let me give you the comparison, okay? So on the bottom line here, we've given you a comparison for the morning peak hour and the evening peak hour. Senior housing is going to generate 25 car trips, and in the afternoon, 32, okay? Just during that 1 hour. If this was to become retail, you're going to see 76 in the morning. Not so much because obviously it's retail, it's not a busy time of the day. But look at the PM peak hour. You've bumped it to 284. Now, before anybody asks me the question, because I know that Mark raised this issue with me, just so you understand, as I was listening to what you said the other night, those numbers take into account a 40% discount factor for the retail, or what's called drive-by traffic, pass-by traffic. The assumption is that a lot of the traffic that's already on Pleasant Street might decide to pick up a cup of coffee or some takeout food or go to a supermarket, whatever. So the numbers that are generated by the traffic software are discounted by 40%. So I just wanted to make that point, This is a low number. This is not the highest possible number we could have used. This is a low number. But we're trying to be realistic, and we're trying to take Mark's comment into account. Again, just to try and give you some perspective, during the AM peak morning hour, the morning peak hour, senior housing would bump the traffic by 2%, and in the evening by 1.5%. But look at the retail. 4% in the morning, that's okay, tolerable. But look at the afternoon peak hour. You're going to see a 15% increase in the traffic. Okay? And again, the only reason I'm saying this, because again, Kalmar will not build retail. Okay? The only reason I'm making this point to you is to give you some context so that you can make a decision between A or B. Okay? Which is the lesser choice here? Which is the easier choice for you people to make? That's what we're interested in here. Let's go next. So traffic conclusions are that we will create fewer car trips than any of the currently allowed uses on the property, and we'll create less truck traffic. Okay? Okay. Now, somebody has expressed a concern about open space. I'm going to put up an aerial photograph after this to give you some idea. Kalmar is buying 10 acres. Of that 10 acres, 5 acres is a wetland or a wetland buffer and will never be developed. Okay? Because if I said to you, we're buying 10 acres, we're only going to build on 5, you're going to say to me, well, how do I know in 2 years that Kalmar's not going to come back and put up a second building? We can't, because the second half of our 5 acres is a wetland. Okay? We bought that 5 acres for other reasons. It relates to the size of the building and this, that, and the other. It will never be built on. Cannot, by law. We're also providing a 15-foot wide vegetated buffer on our side of the boundary line. I'm going to put up a plan later on that's going to show the neighbors exactly where your boundary lines are. It's actually pretty closely follows the stone wall that you're probably all familiar with. And the reason I'm going to do that is that in addition to our vegetated buffer, I want those of you who have, there are some 50, 60-foot high trees on some of the neighboring properties on that side of the stone fence. Those trees, that vegetation is not ours to touch, that's yours. We're not doing anything to that, that's all staying in place. So when I put up the plan with the stone wall on it, you will hopefully have some frame of reference to be able to understand what's not changing behind your houses, okay? So here is the aerial photo. This is, I know, Google Earth, one of them. And what we've done here is we've superimposed our site and our building on this, okay? Let me just go back here. As you might guess, this is all vegetation, okay? This is the wetland that I just referenced. This obviously is the area that we're going to be changing if we get approved. There's a tremendous amount of probably virgin woods and forests back here, okay, that we're not touching. In terms of wildlife, yeah, the wildlife here is going to be disturbed. But in terms of it having places to go, look at this. It's huge. It's absolutely huge. There's a tremendous amount of open space back there, okay? And remember, this can never be built on. We own it, but we can't build on it because it's a wetland. So all this is staying. There's been a concern expressed regarding the values of your property, okay? And what the effect of the Kalmar proposal will be on those values. I can't stand here and tell you that there will be no effect on the value of your property if Kalamar's proposal goes ahead. I don't know. Nobody knows, okay? It's a residential, it's a big building, but it's a residential use. Does that really affect the value of the surrounding residential uses or not? I don't know. But what I do know is this, that if Kalmar doesn't build and that becomes commercial, okay, think about it. There's going to be loading docks around there. There's going to be trucks in and out all the time, okay? That will definitely depress the value of the adjacent property. So again, when you're considering what the alternatives are that are available to you, take that into consideration. you know, why is Calamar doing this? Well, obviously Calamar's doing it because it's in the business of doing it. But why is it in Stoughton? A fortunate coincidence, okay? Back in 2009, your own housing report identified the fact that the needs for senior housing was not being addressed by anybody, okay? The Hanson property, which by the way they've owned since 1948, has never been on the market before. It is a pure coincidence that a broker that Calamar had retained contacted a broker that the Hansons had retained, and that Calamar found this property before anybody else did. It's one of those unusual circumstances where the objectives of the developer and the stated objectives of the town as a whole, okay, the entire community, are consistent with one another. It's not as though you've got a developer coming in here who's proposing a use that the town goes, not interested. We're not mobile. We're not the mobile site, okay? Is there a need for this? According to the census, there are 6,000 people in Stoughton who are over the age 62, just in Stoughton, okay? And after the winter that we've just had, with the ice dams and the constant shoveling and the plowing and the expense and the damage, okay? I'm not surprised we've got 60-some people on a waiting list, okay? I was very happy not to have to touch a shovel for the last 2 summers because I sold my house and I've downsized. We've not done any outreach to any adjacent towns. Okay? We're expecting that when we start that process, after the Stoughton gets first bites at the apple for these units, that the response is going to be enormous. Just to give you an example, in the building that I live in now, one of the maintenance staff lives in an adjacent town. And she saw me carrying through the lobby of my building a board that showed our site, okay? And it identified it as being in Stoughton. And she stopped me. And she asked me what was going on, and I explained it to her. And she's made me promise that once this site is built, once Calamar develops this, that I'm supposed to get her on the waiting list. Chris is just hearing this for the first time. Because she lives in an adjacent town with her husband, and they're done. They want to sell the house, downsize, and they want to move into something like this. They do not want the responsibility for maintenance. They don't want to be worried about living in a condominium. They don't want to be worried about increasing common charge fees and special assessments. They don't want to deal with the maintenance. They want it to be really easy. They're looking for an easy life. Just one random example, okay? So what are the benefits that we're providing? Stoughton residents are going to be able to stay in the town where they grew up, where their families are, where they have connections. They want to stay part of this community. They want to stay part of your community, okay? This gives them the opportunity to do that without having to stay in a home that they don't want to maintain, they don't want to pay a mortgage on anymore. They want to sell the house, take the equity, put it in the bank or under the mattress, and let it feel warm and cozy when they go to sleep at night, thinking about the money they've just put in the bank, okay? They do not want to invest their money back into a condominium and have it tied up and then have to worry about what would happen if I have to sell the condominium, okay? As an aside, there have been 2 previous attempts in Stoughton to do age-restricted condominiums, and both of them failed, okay? I have the paperwork with me tonight, okay? And what happened in each of those developments is that the developer came back and said, I can't find buyers over this age limit. 55, I think, was one, 60 maybe the other. I need the age restriction lifted so I can tell it to anybody, okay? People at this age group do not want to buy condominiums. They want to live in rentals. Calamar has done this all over the country. It's a proven model, okay? We expect this building to be full in no time at all, and to stay full as well, especially at the kind of rents that we'll be charging. Stoughton residents will be given first priority at renting these units as allowed by law. What that means is that before we start advertising anywhere outside of Stoughton, there will be a marketing campaign that's focused just on Stoughton for some period of time, okay? And you've already seen the response because the ads in the Penny Saver are marketing ads. They're directed solely at town meeting and at town meeting members, but they've generated such a response. When we go full blast with a marketing campaign, I don't know what the response is going to be. He's just had to hire a new receptionists just to handle the phone calls that are coming in. There's going to be an increase in annual net revenue to the town. With all due respect to the Hansons who are sitting here, don't take this the wrong way, guys. I know that a number of you don't find the aesthetics of the Hanson property particularly pleasing. If Kalmar builds what they're proposing, one of the houses and one of the barns will come down, and I am told that ultimately the rest of the property will be sold and the other structures on the property will also come down. It is inconceivable to me that someone will pay money for that land and want to retain those structures. They'll be coming down. So there'll definitely be an improvement to the streetscape. And we'll be doing part of that, which I'm going to show you in a moment. I know that a lot of you don't agree with me on this statement. But the fact of the matter is that this will help preserve the residential nature of the community. Okay? Because it's going to eliminate the possibility you're going to end up living next to something that's a commercial use. Guaranteed. Okay? Who's already voted to support this? There's been a lot of confusion about the process. Okay? What's happened so far has been approvals by various town boards that are required either by a state statute or by your local town bylaws in order to get the proposed zoning onto the warrant. So far we've been in front of the Municipal Regulations Committee, the Finance Committee, and the Planning Board. And as you may all know, so far they've each recommended town meeting approve this. But that does not mean it will be approved by town meeting. The ultimate decision is with town meeting. The selectmen haven't voted yet, but we've made an informal presentation to them. And Mr. Cohen was chairman of the Municipal Regulations Committee when we were in front of that. And so far, we're pretty sure that the selectmen think that this is a good idea. Okay? The one selectman who hasn't actually told us that yet is Mr. O'Regan. Margaret. However, we think that Mr. O'Regan is going to support this because during his recent campaign for selectmen, he put this ad in the Penny Saver. And one of the things that this ad says is, he's claiming credit, that he wrote the bylaw, now being used by the Housing Authority, expanding senior housing throughout town. So he's clearly in favor of senior housing. After the election, that he went on record with the Brockton Enterprise saying, I ran on a campaign that the work to move the town forward isn't finished yet. By placing first, it tells me that the voters agreed on the work we need to do and what we need to get it done. Now, I'm assuming that he's including in that reference the senior housing that he's in support of. We won't know until the selectmen actually take a formal vote on what to do with this proposal, whether or not it's going to be they're going to recommend it to town meeting or not. So that was the part of the proposal of my presentation that was trying to give you some context. I heard your comment, I'm wasting your time, and I know that I'm not going to change everybody's mind. I may change nobody's mind. Like I said, I want to remind you, all I'm trying to do is try to make you feel a little bit more comfortable and give you some context for the decision that you're faced with about what you would prefer to see on this site. Okay. So now let's just go to the proposal itself. It's relatively simple, okay? And again, I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with this. Here's Pleasant Street. We have a driveway coming in. We've got a, no, go, that's okay. We've got a driveway coming in, okay? We've got parking here. We've got some, I think, 39 undercover garage parking spaces in these structures. It's got a mind of its own. Right? It's got a mind of its own. And this is the building, okay? Now, we looked at different configurations for this building. And again, the people on Low Avenue will disagree with me on this, okay? But we decided that the least intrusive way of positioning this building on this site was to do it like this, with the back of the building towards Low Avenue. And the reason we did that was that the other alternative would be to swivel the building this way around and put all the traffic in here. And we thought that that would be more intrusive for the neighborhood, or at least the neighborhood on Low Avenue, than this proposal. The other thing I want to mention to you is that while we've done a lot of geotechnical work and we haven't turned over every shovelful of dirt on the site, we know that there's a good amount of ledge in, is it me? I'm sorry. It's a good amount of ledge in this area, and we don't want to have to remove it because that will create a nuisance in terms of truck traffic for the neighborhood, okay? So this has been designed to minimize the amount of construction traffic that would otherwise go in and out of this, okay? This is another representation. This shows you the houses along Pleasant, and here's Low Avenue. Now, the reason we put this up is this. This is to help orient you. This red line here is the stone wall. Now, I assume that the people who live here and on Low Avenue are familiar with that stone wall. The stone wall actually follows the boundary line of our lot very carefully. It's almost exactly precise, okay? Everything on this side of the stone wall, we're not touching, okay? So if you have vegetation, trees, whatever, on this side of the stone wall, that's yours. We're not touching it, okay? We can only touch what's inside that red line, this area in here. Everything on this side, not out, can't touch it. There's a lot of very tall trees in this area, okay? Are we done? Oh, okay. So this is a view from Pleasant Street. Again, an artist's rendering based on the actual architectural drawings, the geotechnical work, the engineering work. I want to make one point about this. If you're standing here on Pleasant Street, it's 450 feet. It's hard to tell because of the perspective. It's 450 feet from here to the building. Okay? This building does not sit on top of Pleasant Street. It's way back, way, way back. Okay? The entrance will be landscaped. We obviously have an interest in making it look as attractive as possible. It's the first thing people will see when they drive in thinking about renting a place there, okay? And I suspect that Mr. Scardina, when we get to site plan review, is going to require more landscaping than we've shown here, because I know this is a pet topic for him. Okay. And this is another plan. This is actually, we put this in here in case there are any questions about this. Again, the area within the red lines is what's subject to the rezoning, but that's not our entire site. The only thing that we would own if this goes through and develop is the area within the dots. The rest of it, we wouldn't be touching. We don't have it under agreement, but we included it because at the time this plan was developed, the engineers were still trying to figure out the best access, egress, and how to orient the building. And we wanted to make sure that however the building and the site ended up being designed, it was all included within the overlay district. But again, it's only the area that's dotted on this plan that will be done by Calamar if approved by town meeting. And I think I'm done.
As I said earlier, at this point, does the board have any questions? Okay. I indicated that we would open it up one person at a time, coming up to the microphone, be recognized by the chair, just so we can control time. Mr. Souza, your hand is up first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David? Eric, battery's dead. You're the best, buddy. You're the best. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David Souza, 53 Glover Drive, also a member of the Board of Selectmen. I had the opportunity to see these plans prior to most anybody doing to be on the Board of Selectmen. I do like the approval for the seniors. Until a couple weeks ago, I received several phone calls, I should say an email first. I've contacted neighbors on Pleasant Street. Some of the neighbors have concerns. I admit to it, I'm still in favor of it, but I'm here to hear the concerns of the residents. To let them know, like I said, when I ran for the selectmen, to listen to the people, so I'm just letting people know that I am here for you people to listen to yous. I gotta be out of here about 10 minutes to 10 because I have to go to work, but if you have any other concerns, please call me, and I will try to work with the people and everything else, so, thank you.
Anybody else like to speak? That gentleman back there?
My name is John Clark. I live at 530 Pleasant Street. And could you put the picture of the actual site back on for me? That one's good enough. You see the area where the buildings are. Now you tried to show us a 70,000. This paper says that they're allowed a 70,000 square foot building at this time. You're looking at more than 5 acres, you say, that you're going to develop, and the other 5 is wetland. That's 250,000 square feet. Where do you fit the 70,000 square foot building? That's a hell of a lot more than 70,000 square feet. Your whole site is 500,000 square feet.
Yeah. That's the
That is
70,000.
not 70,000 square feet. That is 250,000 square feet.
The building, under the
It's on a
current, under the current,
5-acre site, that's 250,000 feet.
under the current zoning, in
The
order.
current zoning is along Route
Sir,
139. It
sir,
does not go into the woods.
Can I finish? And I'll explain to you.
One at a
if you let me
time,
speak.
please.
I'm trying to speak. I
Mr.
asked
Simons,
for
you'll
the
have a chance
microphone.
to respond to him.
My argument
I
now
respond
is you're
first?
showing us a picture that's irrelevant.
Okay.
That adds up to 250,000 square feet, 5 acres. Do the math.
You may
Fun? I assume that the 250,000 square feet is the square footage of the 5 acres. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, the entire 10-acre site would be 500,000 square feet.
Okay. So what we did was, to produce this plan, okay, we calculated what the zoning bylaw would allow for the maximum.
hasn't gone through
Let me
yet,
finish,
though.
let me finish. For the maximum size of the building, okay, that would, and we also had to accommodate the parking, because we could we could cover the 5 acres in concrete, but if I can't provide the parking on site, I can't get a building permit or a CO. It is 70,000 square feet of building, not 70,000 square feet of raw land. There is 5 acres of raw land up there that's buildable.
This letter has your name on it, Calamar, and it says the zoning now allows 70,000 square feet. You're talking about 250,000 square feet. How are we
Of
supposed to swallow
250,000
that?
square feet of what? A building?
Right now, there's an existing general business zone of 70,000 square feet. What you guys are proposing is 500,000 square feet. You say that half of it's wetlands, now we're looking at 250,000 square feet. And I'm totally against seeing a 3-story project in my backyard.
Understand?
My family moved out of the projects when I was born. We don't want them in our backyard.
Understood.
You, sir? Again, state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. Mark Semanian, 5 Low Avenue. I'm also a newly caucused town meeting member, and a lot of community members have been coming to me. My concern with this is we have been aware of the general business zone that is in place. This is what the people see as a scare tactic. They don't want to hear about this, and frankly, we shouldn't be talking about this. We should be talking about the overlay, which is before this board. Am I correct?
The overlay has come to us through the public hearing process on 2 occasions, but that's the bylaw, not the project. Mr. Simons was correct in saying that the planning board has not seen any definitive site plan approval plans as of yet. His comment about the fact that there'll be another public hearing process with respect to that is correct. If it passes, if the zoning changes. If the zoning doesn't change, then all bets are off as far as the senior project is concerned.
Correct.
But the zoning, sir, is the zoning. I mean,
But why are we, the people feel like they're being threatened by that. And I've had conversations with Mr. Simons about this, and the reality remains, they keep bringing up, if you don't accept this, you're gonna have a strip mall in your backyard. And that may or may not be the case. However, anything that goes into that property will go through the same process that this is going through. And we just listened to a gentleman prior to this hearing talking about his own redevelopment of the property, and you guys were tough on him, and rightfully so, because you're looking out for the best interests of this town. I am making the assumption you will do the very same for any project that comes before this board. So all of this talk about you're going to have a strip mall if you don't accept this, in my opinion, it's kind of clouding the real issue. And the real issue is they want to put up, Calamar would like to put up a 128 unit in a residential area. What I want to know is how this actually does fit the true need of our seniors in this town. I work for the seniors in this town. I'm self-employed. I have a small construction business that focuses on maintenance, and the majority of my 300 clients are elderly because they can't do it on their own anymore. So they rely on contractors like myself willing to work with them on a reasonable pay service basis so that they can maintain their homes, the same homes that they worked very hard all their lives to accumulate and to have. This is an independent living, as they have stated, facility. It doesn't address any of the needs of our seniors that aren't independent. So if you're 62 and moving in here, you're moving in here still going to work. Retirement age is 64. So the whole traffic analysis thing becomes very cloudy to me, and I start to lose an understanding of how we come up with such a small number of cars. Secondly, that report that was put out by GPI tonight used the same school traffic information on their report that the prior company, was it McMahon, am I right on that?
Yes.
Used in theirs. As a resident at the very top of Low Avenue, I know how many cars come and go, particularly in the morning. The afternoon traffic's much lighter because a lot of those children go to after-school daycare. So they're bussed out in a very different fashion. The traffic is also generally one way, so the impact from Low Avenue and Pleasant, in my opinion, with respect to the board and the folks who did do this impact report, has not been completed. We need a real impact report on that traffic at the corner of Low and Pleasant so that we know exactly how many people are coming in the morning to drop their kids off and how the traffic, the new traffic from 600 Rear Pleasant, which is what we're calling it, right? Am I correct in that? Yes? How the new traffic from that is going to affect the traffic patterns. I don't believe that's been done yet. With all due respect to Mr. Simons and Calamar, I really don't think there's been a comprehensive look at how they're selling an independent senior living home. Well, that to me, I know men and women in their 70s that are still going out to work. I jokingly asked Len the other night, how old are you? And may I share that? He said he was 62, and I says, how close are you to retirement? And he says, not even, not on the horizon. So in respect to that, that's something we really have to look at. There are a lot of issues that the residents are bringing to me, one of which is the wildlife. I know, could you grab the piece of paper on the top there? No, I'm sorry, I'm looking for the one right under the eye. Yeah. I know when the Hansons originally tried to, or desired to sell a small portion, I wasn't here in this town, or I wasn't aware of this at the time, but to a company to put in a cell tower, there had to be a great number of impact reports done, some of which were done by the National Park Service on the wilderness areas. There was others done on wildlife preserves. There were studies done on endangered species and critical habitats. Believe it or not, the Historic Society did, or the State Historic Preservation Society did a study on this. And not sure why. I understand the property was originally owned by Indians, but they were informed and asked if this was okay. No, I don't know much about that. Maybe, Elliot, you would know better. Sure you would, because I don't know much about this, but the floodplains and the wetlands were also studied, none of which have been talked about. A cell tower doesn't take up 5 acres. It's a much smaller footprint. So if we're willing to ensure that these things are done for a cell tower site, which is an access road in a small pad, why aren't we looking at this for a much larger project? I mean, there were a lot of things that Len talked about that I would like, I think, and perhaps the residents would like an opportunity to sit down and talk with him, but again, I go back to the same question. How does this properly fit our need for senior housing? And furthermore, is this the right site for it? With all due respect to Calamar, everybody wants to ensure that this is done in an appropriate fashion and that it's done in the best interest of the town of Stoughton. Not necessarily just for the developer or just for the community that lives there, but for the entire town of Stoughton. I don't see enough yet. I know Mr. Simons will say I'm reaching here, but statistically speaking, 10% of all grandparents, a little bit under, in the United States of America and in Massachusetts specifically, raise their grandchildren, have legal custody of their grandchildren. Now, I know he's told us and assured us that that wouldn't be an issue, that they wouldn't be allowed to live there. But I'm concerned that the only standard put into place is basically self-policing. I'm in and out of some apartments in Brockton, quite a number of them, with housing authority people that are checking out these apartments to ensure that everything is in place and they're safe. And typically, time and time again, there are multiple mattresses in that apartment. Oftentimes, we do not see the actual elderly person that has either the low-income subsidy or no income subsidy, just renting the apartment. We don't even see the elderly person. So it's clear that the system is abused. Everybody knows that. This isn't, it's not a trick. I'm not playing a shell game. People are well aware that the system is taken advantage of. What can we put in place here in Stoughton if this project was to be agreed upon and voted forward? What can we put into place to assure that won't be abused in our town?
I'd like to stop you right there and address that point. Because
sure.
The planning board, when Mr. Simons appeared before us, came prepared with a pro forma lease. And the lease had a provision in there that retained the rights to discharge any resident that was caught, and I don't recall the number of days, Mr. Simons, that tenant had for a occupant under the age of 62. The provision in the lease that you showed us, how many days can you have a visitor that's under the age of 62?
The lease says that no one.
I think it was 2 weeks.
More than 14 nights in any 1 year period. It's designed to allow residents to have overnight guests occasionally. It's designed to prevent anyone under 62 from living there on any kind of permanent basis.
In addition to that, I believe that the applicant has also agreed to irrevocably designate the age 62 limitation on the place. Mr. Simons is confirming that, yes. That is our understanding. The projects that he alluded to that came before the Board of Selectmen for a reversal of that did not have such an irrevocable provision in them, and as a result, they did come and ask for changes of marketability. But I also want to have our town engineer comment on the integrity of the peer review process, because I think he's worked with GPI and McMahon Associates on other projects, so I'm going to let him comment on the integrity of the analysis that was done on those.
I'm not, excuse me if I may, I'm not questioning the integrity of the companies that did the study. What I'm saying is that the studies weren't done at the appropriate times. So there was a study that was done between 2 and 4 p.m. on January 22nd, the only study that was done on the traffic impact coming in and out of the school. Furthermore, that study was done in that report, we were told that study was done at the corner of Central and Pleasant. The problem exists at the corner of Low Avenue and Pleasant, primarily. So I'm not questioning the integrity of the companies, Chairman. I'm simply saying that not enough has been done yet. But please, I apologize.
Go ahead, Mr. Tisdale.
Mark Tisdale, town engineer. GPI is a consultant we've used on various projects in town. They're actually our own consultant on our own design projects in town too, not just a third-party review. They're also Mass DOT's #1 rated consultant in the entire state for their design. So we have a lot of trust in GPI, and we believe they are very good engineers. I believe they're good engineers too. I haven't had time to specifically review the report because I just got it 2 days ago. And as you go through the site plan review process, there are discrepancies. You might think there should be another analysis point, there should be other things looked at, and those things come through the process. But right now, the plans are not detailed enough to really get a definitive analysis done from that standpoint. Anything else you want me to talk about, Joe?
Yes. Anything else? And I would like to hear from some other residents if you're through, sir.
For now, yes, please.
Okay. Anybody else that would like to speak? Mr. Hanson?
Yeah. I'm Jack Kilzeski. I live at 547 Pleasant Street. My concern, if this project does go through, where is the water coming from, the water pressure? We have a big water pressure problem in that area. Where is the water going to come from? Why would Calamar want to build a senior development there? There is no public transportation there. There is no shopping there. There is no sidewalk on one side of the street. Why? That's all I got to say.
I think there was a hand in the back that I may not have seen. Barbara Anzavino?
Barbara Anzavino, 25 Ross Avenue, and I just have a question because it's a zoning change. I don't understand where it says in here that this is what would be built here, because we're changing the zoning. So if they, for whatever reason, back out, does this zoning change permit somebody else to come in and build something even larger? Where is it in here that says they can have 120 units and no more? If they come to you, if we pass this zoning, could the planning board knock it down at that point, or are you committed to 120? Because I don't see it in here. I don't know what I should be looking for. So that's my concern, because when you change zoning, you change it, like he said, for the next 8 years. So how are you protecting us for that? And my other question, again, I know it's nitpicky, but what about the parking? Where did that number come from? Why is it 1.25? Why is it not 2? And if what I was reading today from ITE was that you need a lot of parking in these kind of units because people come to visit them, particularly like on Mother's Day and holidays. So is this adequate parking? And if it's not adequate parking, and again, I'm depending on you guys more than anything because they wrote it, you guys kind of know, should we change it? And if we do change it, maybe we should change it before we vote on it, because it seems like it's awful little. So those are my two concerns. Can we limit it so they can't go up? And should we have more parking? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to address some of those points. I see a reoccurring theme in some of the speeches, and that is we want to come back to the point is the issue immediately before us is a zoning change. What Mr. Simons has done is talk about the project itself so that you can begin to visualize what will be there, instead of just talking about zoning in the abstract, because it really is a very tough concept for people to put their hands around. So what he's done is he's put a picture with a concept. So I think that, again, I want to repeat what the professionals and what he has said and the board will say, and that is that this is not a site plan review public hearing. We are discussing the premises, but that's not the last discussion. It's not the last public hearing on the subject. And as Mr. Simons even alluded, he realizes that the planning board will be tweaking the project. And I want to assure the people the same way. We look de novo at parking, we look at traffic, but knowing these were concerns, knowing that he has a specific project in mind, these studies were done in advance. Normally, they're not done until just before the site plan review process, or they're required by the planning board as part of the site plan review process. Those of you that were here for the prior hearing heard us require request the applicant to consider an economic impact of the project on Stoughton. So those are things that the planning board requires during the public hearing and evaluation process. So I assure you that tonight or tomorrow is not the end of this analysis. And then I'm going to ask Mr. Simons to comment on some of the questions and the comment about the water that were made before.
Through the chair, could I address some of Mrs. Ansavino's questions? I understand exactly where you're going with your questions on that. Even though this is conceptual in nature, we are voting on a zoning bylaw, whether it's a zoning overlay or a zoning bylaw. And I think that Mrs. Ansavino's questions were, where did 1.25 come for the parking? If you vote on an overlay, that's what you're voting for. And I think that's what her question was. Where did you get that 1.25 parking spaces? Because that's not going to change, even if it comes to the planning board. It's still going to be 1.25 per unit. I think that's perhaps what the questions are, is as you look through the packet here, you look through the overlay district itself. And I think that people are looking at not just the conceptual, what it says in the overlay district itself for the dimensional requirements, whether it's the lot area, 350,000 square feet, minimum lot width. I think that that's important too, and that's something that has to be looked at closely by the planning board as far as the requirements, say open space, whatever it may be. I think people need to know how this will fit. It might not be this project, but these are the requirements that we're working from, and these aren't going to change. If these are voted for, this is what you're voting for. These are your dimensional requirements. And through the chair, I think that's what the questions are. Where did these particular numbers come from? Like, where did you get the 1.25 parking? Because we're voting on the bylaw, not on the project. We're voting on what the bylaw says and how it can be built. And does this make sense for your area and community? Does it fit in? I think that's what your question was. Maybe I'm being long-winded about that. Mrs. Ansavino, is that what you were going in that direction? We're voting for the zoning of the overlay. No matter what that looks like, this is what we're living with. Okay.
How you doing? Stephen McLeod, 123 Low Ave. I got two questions, kind of. I got this week's penny saver, and I've been talking to Mr. Simons the last couple of days, and about more or less is, one of the bulleted points on the actual penny savers, it says that it'll be a very low impact and it'll fit into the neighborhood. And according to Mr. Simons, artistic rendering that he showed us, it said it was going to be 450 feet from Pleasant Street, right? And it says that it won't be on Pleasant Street, it'll be 450 feet away from it. But, the people that live actually behind Pleasant Street on Low Ave, like I do, it's actually going to be 31 feet from me. So, I mean, you can say that, 450 feet from Pleasant Street, that's all well and good, but not affecting the neighborhood is another thing. Because, my backyard, even though it's not my land, it ends at the rock wall, I understand that, will definitely be affected by it. I'll have a 3-story building with balconies overlooking my backyard as I mow my lawn. This is something that has to be taken into consideration because I don't think it fits into the neighborhood, and I think people can vouch for that. The other thing I wanted to bring up too is the tax question. You mentioned that the tax revenue that's going to be generated for the town, is that based on per building, or is that going to be based on occupancy? So for instance, if you get 70% occupancy rate, is it going to be less tax money for the town, based on the excise tax, et cetera, et cetera? So my question is really just, what's the tax based on? So thank you.
I'm going to, Mr. Simon, do you mind responding to some of that or all of it?
I'll take these as I remember them, but Chris can, if I miss something, let me know. So one of the hot topics is, how do we ensure that only people age 62 are going to be living here, okay? And this is an issue that was actually raised previously by one of the members of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I've talked to Calamar, and I'm sorry? Well, partly, but we have more information that will perhaps help satisfy that issue that the planning board is not yet aware of because we haven't talked to them about it. So the ultimate enforcement authority on the 62 is the building inspector. If someone was to call him up and tell him that they think there's somebody under 62 living in one of these units, he would take his normal enforcement action, go out there and see what was going on. Now, you're going to tell me that the building inspector is not going to want to be involved with evicting people. He's going to have a difficult time actually enforcing that age limitation. And you're probably right, because he's a decent guy and he doesn't really want to do that to anybody. So here's what Calamar is willing to agree to. If the building inspector gets a written complaint that there are people under the age of 62 living permanently or semi-permanently in one of our buildings, okay, Calamar will take action, and the kicker is that if Calamar fails to take action, and I'll come back to that in a moment, that they'll be willing to allow the planning board to impose a set of fines for allowing people under 62 to live there. So there is a financial incentive for Calamar to make sure that people under 62 are not living there. The way it would work is this. The building inspector would send a written notice to Calamar that he believes that there's someone under the age of 62. Calamar would have a certain period of time, it has to be some reasonable period of time, say 30 days, in which to respond to that, make inquiry, and to start taking action if they find somebody at the age of 62 to get them out and to provide evidence of the action that they are doing so. Ultimately, it might require them to go in front of a judge and get an eviction order, and that can take some time. If Calamar fails to make any attempt to enforce the 62 age restriction, they would be liable for a fine as determined by the planning board, payable to the town. There would be a distinct financial incentive for them to make sure that nobody under the age of 62 is living there. When they say 62, they mean 62, okay? The point on the water pressure actually gives me some concern. We've heard this before. We actually had quite a bit of trouble finding information relating to the water pressure in Pleasant Street. DPW initially could not find records relating to it, and information that we could rely on. We actually went out and hired Larry Barrett as a consultant, who I'm sure you all remember used to run your DPW. And he was able to tell us where to find that information. We obtained it, we gave it to DPW, they have run numbers, and DPW, not us, DPW is telling us that there's sufficient water to service our apartments. We clearly do not want to make a multi-million-dollar investment and then find out there's no damn water for our tenants. That would be the height of stupidity. However, based on your comment, I'm going to recommend to the client that we double check that information. Because if there's a problem, we don't want to make the investment. Okay. Now, it may be on one side of the street, maybe, I have no idea what the engineering is, but thank you for raising that, because that's the kind of thing we need to know about.
We're just gravity fed. That's it, period.
I don't know what the engineering is for this, but they've determined that, based on the information we're given, that we can service the apartments.
Excuse me, we'll let the speaker speak, and if you want to speak, you'll be given your opportunity. Mr. Simons, could you address the tax issue, please?
Yes, certainly. The answer to your question about taxes is that whether or not the apartments are empty has no relevance whatsoever to the tax revenue to the town. The assessors figure out the taxes based on a valuation of the building itself and the revenue that's estimated to be generated by the building, estimated. If the actual revenue falls short of the estimates, that's on him. It does not fall on anybody else.
Anybody else have any comments?
Did I miss anything?
Gito? Okay, okay.
My name is Cynthia Cushman. I live at 560 Pleasant Street. And I had a few questions and a few points to make. The first point is that there was an aerial view of the property, and it was pointed out by Calamar that it was plenty of open space for all of the residents that are not represented here, which are living in the environment behind our houses. Well, in fact, that aerial view is our backyards. It is not all Hanson property that's going to be left for the wildlife to return. That's our backyard, so I think that that should be addressed. Secondly, the environmental impact was never answered. That was issued by the gentleman earlier. So I'd like to hear from the board on that, where all of those points from the cell tower had to send out consideration letters and received responses, and that was not answered. So I'd like to have an answer from you.
It's part of our site plan review process. And in addition to that, if they're building within the wetland protected area, there'll be a conservation hearing. The environmental issues are answered and dealt with by the Conservation Commission, not by the Planning Board.
So that brings me to another question. Why wasn't this project brought through zoning and instead of the avenue it's taking right now?
Because the zoning board does not have authority to rewrite zoning bylaws. The use on this premises requires a complete zoning bylaw change. They cannot grant a variance for this project, so it's beyond their discretion. And that's why it is going to town meeting. Believe me, no zoning and permitting attorney wants to bring a case to town meeting when it can bring a case to a zoning board.
Okay, so so residents were not notified in the same process that the zoning, if it had gone through the zoning commission.
And there's a separate process for notifying abutters when we start site plan approval, when and if that happens.
Okay, so we would receive the same notification and the same letters as if it had gone through zoning after the fact.
We have our own notice process, publication and notifying to abutters within a radius of the project. So that will happen if there is a zoning change and if there is a site plan application filed.
But clearly it didn't work very well because none of the residents that are here tonight knew about it until more recently, when now we're right up against a deadline when it's going to town meeting.
Just to address that, and I see the town planner is in the ladies' room, I guess. We had 2 public hearings on this zoning article.
Mm-hmm.
Both were issued in publications that the law requires us to publish in. Normally, there's only 1 public hearing on a bylaw. This particular bylaw had 2 hearings. It had one jointly with the Municipal Regs Committee, and Selectman Cohen was chair of that committee, and as well as with the Finance Committee. Then the Planning Board on March 30th, the Planning Board was in attendance for that public hearing. We were also in attendance for our own public hearing on March 30th. The same process for advertising every single bylaw, every single article on the town meeting warrant was exercised in duplicate on this particular. So it actually got double the coverage. So with respect to, with all due respect to your comment, it was advertised twice as much as it needed to legally be advertised. And as far as the site plan approval, it will be advertised again in accordance with our publication rules for site plan review. So it's, unless you don't read newspapers and don't read the penny saver and don't follow the town warrants, then you probably wouldn't pick up any of this, except we require a specific process with respect to notifying abutters. And Ms. O'Toole has returned, so I'll ask her to comment on the, there's a question on the floor while you were gone regarding the notification and why the neighbors to the project were not notified. And I explained that we had had the 2 public hearings and that the so-called notice to abutters happens during the site plan review process. So would you comment on that, Ms. O'Toole?
When a zoning article goes to town meeting, the statutory requirement is that the abutting towns are notified, all the state agencies are notified, and zoning changes for any town meeting in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, abutters, direct abutters are not notified. Abutters are notified when a project comes before a board, if it's like a special permit, site plan review, or a variance. Then abutters under the law have to be notified. Town meeting, for some reason, has different statutory requirements, and those are the only agencies and abutting towns that have to be notified. That's just how the zoning requirements have been set up.
No, I
So that's why
understand.
people weren't notified. They didn't have to be.
And I apologize, but I do understand that you've exercised what you're supposed to do legally, but it clearly, something was missed because all of the residents here did not know about it until within the past 2 weeks. So something broke down in the system, and I'm just trying to determine what that might have been.
I think my requirement as far as, working for the town and with the planning board is, the statutory requirement is for me, when I say me, I mean the town and the planning board. We advertise 2 consecutive weeks in the newspaper. So we ran 2 full-length ads on this entire article in the Stoughton Journal for 2 consecutive weeks in March. And on March 30th, we held the public hearing.
And did it actually show the address that was?
It showed the map and lot.
So map and lot.
Usually in overlay districts, sometimes there isn't an address because addresses usually aren't assigned to properties until you're seeking a permit. So when I do public hearing notices, I do the map and lot because that's what's required. Unless I have an address, like tonight, the 2 public hearings we had, they were existing, so I could put 10 Porter Street, 372 Washington Street. But if it's a vacant piece of land, it doesn't usually have an address. That's the building inspector's job. He assigns the addresses. So when I do an overlay, we actually did an overlay on the town landfill, and that was a map and lot also. So it depends on the site.
So the deed right now to this property does not have an actual physical address listed?
That I don't know.
But wouldn't that be in relationship to what was posted?
It doesn't make any difference. I can use map and lot or address, as long as I'm designating where it is. And I'm using the assessor's map, and that's where it was.
So maybe it's just something to consider in the future so residents aren't completely blindsided by such a large project. Another point I'd like to make is that we keep seeing this model that I'm sure it's right up there. Look at that, amazing. And as you can clearly see, the people are not to scale. So it makes it look like a really small project, but in fact, it looks, if you look at it clearly, They look like they're almost the size of an entire story. So it's deceiving to anyone that's looking at this as this, oh, look at this beautiful project, when in fact, there are actually giants that are living there. So, so I have one final question. What happens if Calamar cannot fill this facility to acceptable occupancy to make it profitable? And that's it. That's all I had. So should I sit down? Or?
I guess I have to ask, yes, if you're through, that's,
Okay.
I'll let the applicant, because that's not beyond the jurisdiction. Okay, I'm being advised by the board with respect to making sure that other people have a chance to speak, because that issue will may come up during site plan review. In other words, when we have a public hearing for site plan review, you can raise your question about the last one you just raised.
One last comment, but I would think that the town meeting members would be interested in knowing what would happen to this property if they can't fill it. I mean, I think that's a valid concern, and the town meeting members should know the answer to that.
Well, the only thing I will say, and then I'll let Mr. Simon speak for just 1 minute, because I do want to hear from the other residents, that there has been substantial interest. I hold a letter from somebody that sent it to the planning board tonight who couldn't appear, that I'm hearing from the Hansons and other people in town. One former selectman even expressed interest in possibly living there. So I think that there realistically is. I've not seen as much buzz about the project.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I would say that that's hearsay. No one's showing up with a check saying, I'm paying my first and last month's rent. Here it is. I mean, that's a completely different perspective.
Okay.
And so that's why I was pointing that out, is that I think that the town meeting members need to know what would happen if they cannot fill it, and that's based on hearsay. It's all the buzz of the town, and then that buzz goes away and on to the next thing. And if you can't fill it, what happens? And we have to live with it, because I live right there. So I think we deserve an answer. Thank you.
1 minute, Mr. Simons.
So my client's going to, if this is approved, my client's going to write checks for millions and millions of dollars. He's going to borrow money. He's going to guarantee repayments of the money. And if he's gotten it wrong, then he's going to bear the consequences of it. And the building will sit empty. Let's assume there isn't a single person anywhere in Massachusetts that wants to live in this particular project, okay? It'll sit empty. And from your perspective, that's probably a good thing, because a lot of you don't want these people living next door to you. You don't want to see the few cars going in and out. It'll sit there empty. There's nothing else we can do with it. We can knock it down, but we've just spent millions of dollars putting it up. Okay? I'm sorry? Or we could sell it. But let me point something out to you, okay? The zoning that it's being built under only allows it to be occupied as rental units for people over age 62. So if we can't fill it with over 62-year-olds, and we're in the business, okay, somebody else going to do it, it can't be used for anything else. It cannot be used for anything else. What else can it be used for? They are apartments, but they have to be over age 62. It has to be rental. It's specific. We don't have the ability. The zoning bylaw is drafted, if it's approved by town meeting, only allows people over age 62 to live there. We've just gone through an explanation of how that would be enforced. They are agreeing to incur fines if your building inspector finds people under the age of 62 living there and we don't get them out of the building. So why would we rent to people under the age of 62? We're not making any money off of that. We're not making as much money, we're not making any money off of it. There's no financial incentive for us to rent to people under 62. None, zero.
I think we could debate this all night, but I think there are other people.
Fine.
Fine, I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Hanson, I believe, had his hand up before, and then Mr. Gito.
I thank the board for its time. There's been lots of people saying that NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Well, with all due respect, the only person that's in the backyard of this is us. They're abutters, but it's not their backyard. It's my backyard and my brother's. As far as addressing the needs of the older people in the town of Stoughton, considering I've had 5 people contact me and said, tell me about it, and I had to redirect it to Margaret because I didn't have the specific information as the rent and everything else and the amenities. All right. But this apartment building does indeed address the needs of the town of Stoughton. If you're going to say, well, I don't want it in my backyard, well, whose backyard is it going to be? Who are you going to say? Who's going to say to the elderly people or the people in this town over 62 that like this town, have roots in this town, have lived in this town for many years, and would like to stay in this town? And now you're going to tell them, well, yeah, you could do that, but no, in nobody's backyard. This indeed does address the needs for a lot of people. And I'm sure they will fill it if that many people contacted me out of the blue about this. There's obvious a need with 6,000 people in the town of Stoughton over 62. All right? So with all due respect, the people who say, not in my backyard, if you can say that for anything. Any building anywhere is in somebody's backyard. All right? And there was somebody that said, well, you know, the Indians used to own the land. If you are white and we're Native American, everybody here is living on Indian land in North America. Thank you.
Mr. Gito?
My name's Lou Gito. I live at 1261 West Street, about 3 or 4 miles from this project. So I can't see it from my backyard. Mr. Simon, I think, when he was talking about the ability to put senior housing on general business property, sort of overstated what the town's interest was. It was for public. It was for the town Stoughton Housing Authority to be able to do that, with the understanding that the zoning bylaw allows a lot of things to occur that the town has charge of, because in fact the town people believe that the town is going to protect the people in the town when they do their work. I think there's a distinction between a public and private in that regard that needs to just be clarified. In the master plan that we're putting together, there is a recognition that we need housing, apartments, and other housing. But if I might read one sentence in this, it says on page 3, residents' concern about large-scale apartment complexes speaks to the need to create housing that is context-sensitive. There's a difference between putting a high-density apartment building in the downtown than it is to put it in a residential area. And so if the zoning bylaw would allow 128 units in a 10-acre parcel of land, that seems to be very high. The residential multifamily use in the downtown, in the town of Stoughton, on land that would be similarly away from the downtown, is 4.5 units per acre. If you were to use the same context-sensitive and high density, by the way, because the RM land is high-density use, there would be 45 units on this parcel. Not as many as is being proposed. So perhaps we have it a little bit wrong in terms of zoning a particular parcel of land. If the general business were in the downtown area, perhaps this would be the right number to use, but not in the area that it's put in. It makes no sense. People talk about NIMBY. I don't think that that's NIMBY. People are not saying we don't want any house people there. They don't want a 3-story building right next to their property. If you were to change that and make it a third the size, you could move the buildings much further away. That makes more sense. Now, the other thing that I would like to mention is, and I guess first I need to ask Mr. Simon a question. Sir, did you say that you had the other 3 or 4 acres under agreement?
Which 3 or 4 acres?
The other 3 or 4 acres that are being rezoned?
No, we do not.
You do not?
No.
Then we don't know what's going to happen there. So is that going to be general business? Is that going to be a strip mall to service the 120-something units that are there already? It could be, could it not? I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense
Mr. Cheeto,
of this.
with all due respect, you're way beyond the scope. Tonight we have a zoning article. You're talking about a hypothetical that isn't even part of this board's consideration.
No, it certainly is. It is part of the zoning because the overlay doesn't take away the opportunity to use the underlying zoning, does it? Or does it? And what do we do if you might go back to one of these slides here? That one, that's a good one. You see the, pardon me while I amble over there.
If you touch the screen, yeah.
Is there an entrance over here?
No.
No, there's not. The entrance is here.
It's a good try.
We can hear him. That other area is not going to be within the rezoned area, and it would still be used for general business. So the part, I have to go over there again, I'm sorry.
You're making our case for us, Mr. Chief. That's correct.
So that portion there could be general business.
Correct.
It could be a
I have no idea.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
It could be another apartment complex. It could be general business. Touching upon the river. I think this is about 3 or 4 acres.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
And this is probably another couple of acres.
I don't know, because they don't own that. They don't own that. Yeah, they don't own that, so.
So let's say it's 4 or 5 acres.
Yep.
People there will still have, potentially, the trucks or whatever else might be there. Or they might not. They might have another 30, 40, 50, I don't know how many apartments you could have there.
No, actually, you couldn't.
Mr. Gito, I think you
Okay,
asked...
well, how many?
That
strip is it so many per acre?
You asked a question, and I'm going to let Mr. Simons answer that question about the zone. Mr. Simon, you want briefly, please?
Well, you could just tell me how many acres, I mean, how many units per acre?
I'm sorry?
How many apartments per acre?
I have no idea, because the way we design this, okay, the minimum lot size, if you look at our zoning, is hundreds of thousands of feet. It's designed only to allow our project, okay? But I want to just backtrack for a second, because I want to thank you, okay? Because what you've just said makes my case for me, okay? So Mr. Gito just stood up and said, it could be commercial, it could be this, it could be that. All true, okay, with respect to the land that Calamar is not buying. All I can tell you is that if Calamar buys this 10 acres, it will not be any of the things that Mr. Gito is worrying about. It will only be senior housing. You will...
Mr.
Let me
Simon,
finish.
no, you're misstating. You're misstating my point.
You
Mr.
listen,
Gito,
I
would you
listen
let
to you.
Mr. Simon speak, please?
Oh, sure.
The only thing I can promise you is that all the concerns that Mr. Gito is raising to you regarding the front part of this here, and the Hansons don't own that. They don't control anything outside these red lines, okay? But the point that you're making about the commercial uses, I can promise you that if Calamar gets this, 10 acres back here, will not, under any circumstances, be retail. They only build senior housing. So thank you for making my point.
You're entirely welcome, sir. And the other point that I was making is that your density is much too high. And so I was only saying that in the context of compounding the issue of having much too high density, and also if we rezone, we still do not protect the other things that you are concerned with. It seems to me that the zoning that we're going to be dealing with at town meeting isn't going to be terribly helpful to the town. It's not going to be helpful to the master plan. I think it's a bad deal.
Anybody else? Yes, sir?
Hey, gentlemen, ladies of the board. My name is Jack Nolan. I live at 591 Pleasant Street. I've lived there pretty much my whole life. I'm not an expert on traffic or anything like that, but let me tell you, traffic is horrendous on Pleasant Street, and this is just going to add to it. And, you know, that's very nice. I've never been threatened so nicely, by the way, sir. Thank you for that. But, and for him to say, oh, just a few cars here and there, I mean, you can't, during the mornings and the afternoons, it's impossible to get out of our driveway. And probably for the rest of the people in Pleasant Street, and I know getting in and out of Low Ave. And you're gonna have 62 and over drivers coming out of there. You're gonna have, whatever, workers that are going in there, people, landscapers, people, it's like, there's gonna be a lot more traffic. I think you guys should vote no on this. Please do. And it's also this, hearing about the wetlands and stuff like that, it's just more woodlands that are being destroyed in the town. And that's, you know, the town ain't going green going that way. There's a lot of There's a lot of other places that a senior living center can go in Stoughton. Not here, not in our backyard. Thank you.
One other person, and we've given 2 hours to this matter, which is more than any other public hearing tonight, so I'm going to, last one more. If hearing none, I'm going to entertain a motion to close the public opinion, public information session, I'm sorry.
Motion to close the public.
Second to that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.